Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and the knives is out. The knives is out. Joe Biden, watch your back. Be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know Core Figures on with a geopolitical message. We got to get into the Democrats. They getting rid of Joe for this fight for power. They know it's over for him. But now they just want to hold on to something for themselves. So let's get right into this. Democrats are now coming out. They want him gone. They want to hold on to the throne. But Joe Biden is a dictator, and he's refusing to go anywhere.
Time we're starting to see some Democratic officials finally begin to speak out. First and foremost is Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Obviously, he's a blue state governor, red state, one of the most popular Democrats in the entire country. What did he have to say? It was not kind. He basically was like, yeah, I guess it's up to him, but it was terrible. Let's take a listen.
Well, the debate performance was rough. It was a very bad night for the president, but he is still the candidate. Only he can make decisions about his future candidacy. And so as long as he continues to be in the race, I support him.
And so is there any thought that you might jump in? Is there any thoughts that you might slide in?
Would you if you had to?
Only the president can determine his future as a candidate. He is the candidate, and as long as he is, I'm supporting him.
You see, one thing you're going to notice about these clowns is they're going to keep saying over and over, only the president can determine. Joe Biden already said him and his family, he ain't getting out the race. So why y'all keep telling him to get out the race? But then they come on TV and say, well, only he can make that decision. Bullshit. Y'all want him out. That's why y'all going public.
Well, I think people want to make sure that this is a campaign that's ready to go and win, that the president and his team are being candid with us about his condition, that this was a real anomaly.
So that's a very important clip. The first part, Governor Andy Beshear. The second part there that we showed you was Sheldon Whitehouse. Now, what arguably even more important, because Sheldon Whitehouse is the Democratic senator from Rhode Island, longtime Democrat. This is a standard guy. These people don't speak out against the White House hardly ever. But for him to basically go after the White House and almost accuse them of a cover-up and question Biden's performance, very significant. I also think Governor Andy Beshear there breaking from the White House and really being the first major blue governor to acknowledge how disastrous that debate was for Joe Biden is a major event. There's also been some major breaking news that actually just happened. I'll go ahead and just bring it to all of you. This is from Jake Tapper. He says that Democratic governors actually held a call yesterday afternoon. Just the governors, no staff, no White House. On the call, Democratic governors expressed concern about what's going on with the president. They know that if they come forward publicly with concern, they will cause Biden to dig in. They are also shocked that Biden has not contacted any of them. There was a discussion.
Now, let's stop there. Understand this, what you just heard. The Democratic governors held a meeting yesterday. They're pissed. Joe Biden haven't even called them to reassure them everything is okay, because he can't call them because he barely can talk, and then they will know it's not okay. They're pissed. They know the game is up. They know, but they've been knowing this. But now the American people know, and they got to save their goddamn selves. So they're leaking to the press. Salute, family. They're leaking to the press that they held the meeting. How would anybody know? How did Jake Tapper at CNN find out about this meeting? The governors told him about the meeting, and that they're demanding to hear from Joe Biden himself, not from Hunter, not from his wife, not from none of his assistants. They want to talk to Joe themselves.
About wanting to have a call with the campaign or the White House, some discussion about having Vice President Harris come and address their concerns, strong sentiment they need to hear directly from Joe Biden. Quote, they are trying to set up a meeting with the White House or via Zoom, but the White House knows of this request.
The governor say no more of that your assistant shit. Nuh-uh, hell no, that's over with. We better hear from the president or we all going public. That's the Democratic governors.
They are not coming in with any specific message, but they feel the need to hear directly from President Biden. So you combine these two things. We've got blue state governor. He's speaking out publicly. He's like, yeah, it's up to him. Only he can make that decision. You only say that when you're like, look, this guy is screwed. Number two, you got the Sheldon Whitehouse. Again, totally normie Democratic senator. Let's go to the next part. And we have here example, a tweet from Tim Ryan, former Senate candidate in Ohio, Democrat.
Oh,
he says, we have to rip the Band-Aid off. There's too much at stake.
Okay, this the other play. Some of them do want to promote Kamala Harris. The racist, bigoted part of the Democratic Party, they don't. They won't promote anything white. They got the good old boy in them. That's serious business about the Democrats. But some of them want to promote Kamala Harris. Why? To draw out some of that black vote that's loyal to her, the sorority sisters and all the Greek freaks. You know, so here's a governor pushing Kamala Harris, and Kamala been coming out, and you had Roland Martin, Boule Martin. He came out saying they better not pass up Kamala. I seen that report. I just don't want to run it on my program. I don't want to hear from him. Then we heard Boule Jim Clyburn coming out today and saying if Biden does step down, so we got to pay attention. Biden is done, and he will step down. They forcing his family. They forcing his hand. Now, if Biden does step down, they will back Kamala Harris.
Stake. The vice president has significantly grown into her job. She will destroy Trump in a debate, highlight the choice issue, energize our base, bring back young voters, and give us generational change. Quote, it's time. I mean, look, I don't necessarily agree with that analysis, but important nonetheless. This is a guy from red state, again, Democrat. They seem to be the ones who are willing to speak out a little bit. There was also an interesting interview with Representative Mike Quigley, Illinois 5th District, normal Democrat to, again, really acknowledging how bad it was for Biden and saying some troubling things for the White House. Let's take a listen.
I think his 4 years are one of the great presidencies of our lifetime.
That's a lot.
But I think he has to be honest with himself. This is a decision he's going to have to make. He clearly has to understand.
Now, once again, I'll tell you, every last one of these people who trying to stab Biden in the back and throw him overboard, they're going to keep saying, but he clearly has to make the decision. He done made the decision. He ain't going nowhere. He's a dictator for life. He want to die in office. That's real talk. And these people here think the American people stupid. They're going to keep saying, well, it's clearly Joe Biden's decision. Bullshit. Y'all want him gone.
I think what you're getting to here is that his decision not only impacts who's going to serve in the White House the next 4 years, but who's going to serve in the Senate, who's going to serve in the House, and it will have implications for decades to come.
It sounds like you're actually open to the idea that it might be the right decision for him to step aside.
I think what I'm stressing is it has to be his decision, but we have to be honest with ourselves that it wasn't just a horrible night. But I won't go beyond that out of my respect and understanding President Joe Biden, a very proud person who has served us extraordinarily well for 50 years. But it's his decision. I just want him to appreciate at this time just how much it impacts not just his race, but all the other races coming in November.
They're all using the same rhetoric. It's up to his decision, but look, he's opening the door. He's like, look, you need to get the hell out of here. And then at the same time, the knives are out for Biden. And because the media is just no longer going to continue to play this game that they have. Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame comes out with a new report last night with more dementia-ridden episodes that he can tell us about that Biden has experienced behind the scenes. Let's take a listen to Carl Bernstein.
These are people, several of them, who are very close to President Biden, who love him, have supported him, have been among them are some people who have raised a lot of money for him. And they are adamant that what we saw the other night, the Joe Biden we saw, is not a one-off, that there have been 15, 20 occasions in the last year and a half when the president has appeared somewhat as he did in that horror show that we witnessed. And what's so significant is the people that this is coming from, and also how many people around the president are aware of such incidents, including some reporters, incidentally, who have witnessed some of them.
The people who were, working with him at Camp David, allegedly in this intensive debate prep, if there were concerns there about this, and I don't know if you have got any word about that, but how anybody involved in that debate prep, I mean, didn't anybody see something?
The debate prep was supervised by Ron Klain, who has been with President Biden for many years. And people I've talked to have all been to Ron Klain in the last year to say, we have a problem. We have a problem such as we saw the other night, that there have been numerous instances.
They say they went to Ron Klain, the small hat who's helping run this country, a year ago. Now, you see how disgusting this is? They say a year ago they've been noticing Joe Biden mental decline, wasn't the same man, can't stay focused. Now a report just came out and said Joe Biden, he's at his best from 10 to 4. What the hell are you talking about? That's nursing home days. The hell you mean he at his best? World War III can start at 8 o'clock at night. You mean he can't handle it because he's not at his best? This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But over a year, they've been knowing this man was weekend at Bernie's, pretending like he running this. This is one of the biggest scandals ever in the history of America, because it leaves the impression, well, who the hell is running this goddamn country? Because it shows it's not Joe Biden.
Where the president has lost his train of thought, can't pick it up again. There was a fundraiser at which he started at the podium, and then he became very stiff, according to the people there, as if it were almost a kind of rigor mortis.
This was reportedly.
It really needs to be explored, according to the people I'm talking to, and I think an awful lot of major Democrats believe this, including some who have made statements to the contrary.
The insane part is that Carl Bernstein is basically the same age as Joe Biden. And look at him. He seems relatively fine, I guess. I mean, he's only 80 years old, spring chicken, compared to the 81-year-old Joe Biden. This is what we're dealing with. I mean, look, this is obviously, it was obvious to everybody, given the public image and the public moments that Biden has had. But now to have these moments openly acknowledged on CNN of all places, also by a prominent reporter like Carl Bernstein, that's just knives out by at least some people around President Biden that are going to be acknowledging the truth. And as more and more Democrats are open and acknowledging this and willing to speak to the media, the cascade is just going to continue. Keep this in mind too. This is a holiday weekend. A lot of people are on vacation, but starting July 9th, Congress is actually back in session. So keep that in mind. And just to explain that, is that all of these Democratic congressmen, they're going to be here in Washington, and they're going to be surrounded by reporters. They're not going to be able to get away with no comments. Right now, they're all at home, or they're doing constituent events, or they're on vacation. They can dodge if they need to. When you're here in DC, it is not that easy. You're going to have every microphone in your face like this. If you're Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, or any of these other people, not coming, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, every single one of these folks is going to have to comment or issue a no comment, which is itself is very, very telling. So this is a big moment. So we've given you both sides of the story here. There's the rigging process, but there's also some starting bubblings about at least trying to get him off the ticket. We'll see which one wins out. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like.
Hour with the mounting fallout from President Biden's widely criticized debate performance that led to mass panic within the president's own party. For the first time, a sitting Democrat is now publicly calling on the president to quit the race. Congressman Doggett of Texas wrote in a news statement, quote, recognizing that unlike Trump, President Biden's first commitment has always been to our country, not himself. I am hopeful that he will make the painful and difficult decision to withdraw. I respectfully call on him to do so. Now, this is happening as brand new CNN polling that was taken after the debate is giving us a fresh look at what voters think about Democrats' chances in November. And the numbers show this, that 75% of Americans think the party's chances would be better if someone else besides Biden were on the ticket. The polling also shows the president's approval rating has sunk to a new low. It is now at just 36%. We're covering this from all angles. We have CNN's MJ Lee live at the White House. First, though, CNN's Harry Enton is here with us. Harry, break down some of the new polling for us.
I mean, these numbers are atrocious for Joe Biden. That's the only way you can put it. I guess the good news when you match him up against Donald Trump is that he hasn't lost any ground from where he was back in April, but he was trailing in April by 6 points, and he's trailing by 6 points now. And, you know, I just think you have to take back a step and look at where we were 4 years ago at this point. Joe Biden was leading Donald Trump by 9 points. This is just a completely different race, one in which Donald Trump has led basically continuously, at least during 2024, and one in which his lead, if anything, is holding or even getting larger right now, high single digits. And I think there's, of course, the big question is, could another Democrat do better than Joe Biden against Donald Trump? And this new poll says, or at least suggests that perhaps they could. Because take a look here. Yes, Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump by 6 percentage points. But look at this.
That's not a new poll. All these polls done shown at times other Democrats would do better. And you want to know why? Because they haven't been running against Trump. They haven't been running. But the moment all the focus hit on any other Democrat, their ass gonna drop down too.
Versus Kamala Harris, the vice president, it's just a 2-point race with no clear leader. So when I look at polls like this and you see the first call for Joe Biden to get out of the race from a member of Congress on the Democratic side, I don't think polling like this will stop those calls. I would only expect them to get louder if polling like this holds in other surveys.
Can we have any insight into why Harris is doing better than Biden?
Yeah, I think we do have an insight. You know, in this particular poll, partisans on each side, you know, Democrats support Joe Biden overwhelmingly. Republicans support Donald Trump overwhelmingly. This is a fight for the center of the electorate. It's a fight for independents. And what do we see among independents? I think that this gives it away, right? If you look and you compare Donald Trump versus Joe Biden and you compare Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, what do you see? You see that Donald Trump leads among independents by 10 points when faced off against Joe Biden. But among independents, those voters that, of course, Donald Trump won in 2016 and then lost in 2020 to Joe Biden, you could see that Kamala Harris is actually ahead by 3 points. She's doing better in the center of the electorate. Now, of course, Harris is not as well known as Joe Biden. She's not as well known as Donald Trump either. But if you look at this point right at this time, what you see is that 22% of voters have no opinion of Kamala Harris. Either they have no opinion or they've never heard of her. Compare that to 8% for Joe Biden, 7% for Donald Trump.
It's a magic trick they pull with numbers. They never heard of her. They just Harris. Soon as they focus on her, her numbers don't hit the goddamn dirt.
So at this point, in my mind, she's a generic Democrat. As she gets better known, those numbers against Donald Trump, given that Donald Trump is not popular at this point, those numbers can close even more. At this point, looking at this data, I am not really quite sure that Democrats can do any worse than they are doing with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. They may, in fact, do better.
Very interesting. Harry, thank you for that new reporting on the polls. We appreciate it. Let's go to CNN's MJ Lee now, who is live for us at the White House. MJ, you have a sitting Democrat in Congress now calling on the president to resign. Has the White House responded?
Yeah, no official reaction yet, Brianna, from the White House or the campaign on the first sitting Democratic lawmaker, as you said, calling on the president to basically step aside and make way for somebody else. Of course, the big concern for the campaign is going to be, is this truly the beginning of the dam starting to break within the party? But what we do know is that, according to reporting from our Jake Tapper, some Democratic governors held a call yesterday and they discussed the concerns that they shared after what they saw on the debate stage last week. And they've asked for a meeting with the White House so that they can discuss those concerns, whether in person or virtually. And the White House is now looking at tomorrow as a potential date for this meeting for a group of Democratic governors. But it is clear the emphasis coming from the governors is that this is a moment when they feel like they need to hear directly from the president, and including the vice president, actually, as well, from the White House. And some of these governors made clear in this discussion that one of the concerns they have is actually about going public with what they are worried about, because they think that it could have the possibility of resulting in the Biden campaign digging in even further. Now, I should note, one interesting note is that we've not gotten any readouts from the White House since the debate last week of the president reaching out directly, making phone calls or otherwise, to top Democratic elected officials like a Leader Jeffries or a Senator Schumer. And that seems incredibly notable given the gravity of the situation right now.
Yeah, it should be alarming to those lawmakers that they are not hearing from the president, because a normal reaction is that he should be calling up everyone and assuaging concerns, doing whatever he can. I wonder about donors, how concerned they are, because I know you have some new information about the campaign's attempt to reassure them.
Yeah, and that level of outreach is very much going on, as we've reported over the last couple of days. And yesterday, there was a call that the campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, held with hundreds of donors. And Jeff Zelenskyy and I spoke with a number of the participants. And it was clear, at least on this call, that O'Malley Dillon wanted to make clear that they were not changing course, at least not right now. And she apparently, according to participants, offered a very staunch defense of the president's health. At one point, according to two participants, she said, quote, he's probably in better health than most of us. Now, one of the participants reacted to this by saying they found this an offensive thing to say and basically dismissive of how widespread the concerns have been and how deep the concerns have been about the president's fitness to serve. Just one thing I will note coming out of the campaign today is that they did release their June fundraising numbers. They said that the campaign had raised $127 million in that month, that this was the best month to date. So far in the cycle, they now have $240 million of cash on hand. But of course, Brianna, despite that bright spot for the campaign, the problem right now for the campaign isn't money, isn't fundraising. It is the question about the viability of the candidate himself.
All right, MJ, I do want to tell you, and this may be the first time you're hearing this as well, but we have just gotten word that ABC News has announced that President Biden will be doing an extended interview with George Stephanopoulos. We expect, as I understand it, this will air in its entirety on Sunday, but I think we are going to be seeing some of the clips of this before then. This is, or pardon me, July 5th, I should say. This is
not going to do it. We need to see him on the campaign trail, talking to the audience, taking several questions from people. That's what we need to see the president doing. Not a scripted interview with George Stephanopoulos or whoever else they're going to be sitting him down with. We don't even know if that's him. Like I say, we don't know who this so-called Biden that's going to be in this interview. That's real. I ain't trying to be conspiratorial, but that's real talk. No, he need to be on the road. People can see him, and then we'll check out if old Joe is out of his mind. Because we believe
interesting, MJ, because this was something we know that the campaign had been considering, and there's going to be, we should be clear, a lot riding on this interview, right?
Nah, bullshit.
Absolutely, Brianna. This is going to be the first time that we are really seeing the president in an unscripted setting. You know, so far, since Thursday night, we've seen the president in different settings in public, but basically every single time he has been using a teleprompter, using prepared remarks, and also he hasn't taken any questions from members of the media, including last night when he gave remarks here at the White House. So the fact that he is going to be sitting down with a trusted TV anchor and taking a whole lot of questions about anything and everything, and is using this as an opportunity to basically show the side of me that you saw on the debate stage on Thursday night. That was a fluke. That was just one bad night. That's what the campaign has been saying. But here is sort of the President Biden that Democrats are hoping to see, that is sort of in charge and in command of the facts. We'll see. You know, this is going to be a gamble, but frankly, I think the campaign and the White House really had no choice. We've seen surrogates and supporters of the campaign basically saying it is imperative that the president get out there in these kinds of settings, unscripted settings, and prove that he can do the job and that he is fit to serve, which a lot of Democrats just do not believe right now, given what we saw on the debate stage.
We don't believe we need more. He need more people. Interview is definitely scripted. They think we're stupid. See, they think y'all stupid. They think y'all stupid. He's going to give an interview and everything's riding on this scripted interview, or we don't even know who this guy is. I'm telling you, man, we can't fall for that. We don't know how many goddamn Joe Bidens there is. Man, we got to remember what Dick Gregory said. There's a couple of these people. We got to understand what's going on here.
Campaign slowly, drip by drip. More Democrats seem to be getting cold feet over President Biden's re-election campaign after that disastrous debate performance. That performance has some wondering if he should even stay in the race, if he's capable of doing the job, as questions grow over whether he's too old to serve. Democratic Senator Pete Welch of Vermont criticized the Biden team in an interview with Semaphore. He said campaign officials have had a dismissive attitude towards people who are raising those questions to them directly. Elizabeth Schulze joins me now from the White House, and political director Rick Klein is here in the studio. Elizabeth, some Democrats in Congress are now getting more vocal with their concerns with the president. Lloyd Doggett of Texas coming out. What are we hearing?
Yeah, that's right, Terry. And this is the first sitting member of Congress to publicly call on President Biden to step aside from the nomination. We just got this statement from Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett. He says President Biden's first commitment has always been to our country, not himself. Get the lawnmower going by there, Terry. He says, I am hopeful he will make the painful and difficult decision to withdraw. I respectfully call on him to do so. So a lot of those concerns that we had heard privately from Democrats in the wake of the debate.
How can you show the world you're presidential? By going to war with some goddamn body. It's a very dangerous time we're in right now, man. That's serious business. And the small hats will love what war? He can't go fuck with China. He can't go fuck with Russia. He's still gonna get his ass towed up in the Middle East, but that's what the Zionists want.
Are now being voiced more publicly. We are also told from sources that Democratic governors held a call among themselves on Monday. They discussed President Biden's debate performance. Some of them also were frustrated by the lack of outreach from the White House, we are told. And we are also told that the president is expected to hold a call with those Democratic governors. Again, he would be on the call tomorrow, Terry.
All right, Elizabeth, thanks. Rick, our political director. This is not a good look, right? He hasn't even called governors. Rachel Scott says he hasn't reached out to people on the Hill personally. And he's not given a major interview. These are kind of standard procedures for candidates who stumble like this. Is it because he can't anymore? Or what's happening?
Well, I think his activities since the debate have actually fueled the concerns. He did that rally in North Carolina the day after. Seemed better. Seemed like he was very much with it. He did the speech last night, but that's a teleprompter speech at the White House. He had all day to prepare. He hasn't yet had a public performance that puts to rest the questions that are swirling. And by not cutting in some of the Democratic governors and members of Congress, he's fueling a perception that he's closed off from a lot of the feedback. That's the concern we've been hearing. It's going to be a big topic that the White House has asked about today. Is the president going to get out there more to actually listen to these concerns? Because as of now, there's a lot of frustration out there, not just about the performance last Thursday, but about the lack of engagement over what it means and whether it speaks to a larger issue that has to be addressed.
Yeah, presidents can get isolated in the White House, right? They can depend on that inner circle. They feel perhaps they can't trust people, especially at his age. He needs support as every president does, but he in particular, perhaps. Is that what's happening here? It's just too tight an inner circle and they aren't handling it right?
Well, it's certainly a tight inner circle. And a lot of the frustration that we've heard aimed at those aides and the people that are very close to him, they did too much to prep him in debate or not enough. All of that, I think, is about the fact that it is a very close and tight-knit group of people. His family members and his very close aides, many of which he's worked with for 40 years, are the ones that are protecting the president for better or for worse. And members of Congress, even longtime allies, former senators that he served with for a long time, members of the House, governors, they feel like they are not able to penetrate that inner core to voice their concerns. And it is extraordinary now to have this first Democratic member of Congress go as far as Lloyd Doggett did.
It's bad. Yeah. It's not good. So, Elizabeth, President speaking about climate change in Washington, one of the strategies is change the subject to things that you think you're strong on. So how important is it for him to be seen working, talking to people, walking, talking, all of that?
Yeah, clearly, Terry, the president trying to show that he's up to the task. He's delivering remarks today about extreme weather, trying to propose some of the steps his administration is taking to help Americans dealing with extreme heat. But at the end of the day, as much as the focus the White House would want to be on the substance of that, it's also about how is he going to present those remarks? What's he going to look like? How does he sound? As Rick pointed out in the president's first remarks back at the White House here after he was at Camp David over the weekend, he read straight from the teleprompter. It was 4 minutes. He did not answer our shouted questions. And so if this is another speech where he's looking at prepared remarks from delivery, he does not go off the cuff, which is something that a lot of his advisors, including top Democratic allies like Senator Chris Coons, are urging him to do. That's really what he needs to show that he's up to right now, taking those off the cuff questions and being able to be unscripted, like in those moments during the debate.
It's hard, as they say in sports. Father Time is undefeated. Elizabeth Schulze, Rick Klein, thanks very much.
Biden deigned to make his first public appearance yesterday. He made some comments on the Supreme Court. It was scheduled for 7:45 p.m. There was a lot of anticipation. This is President Biden's first appearance since his disastrous public debate. Is he going to allay concerns? Is he going to speak for a long time? Is he going to show us that he really can do the job? Is he going to take any questions from all the reporters? Pretty much none of that happened. He spoke for a record 4 minutes. He took no questions. He read off of a script, including at one point saying, quote, end of quote, showing that it was the end of the quote in the teleprompter. And then perhaps most puzzling of all was caked in orange makeup. Not an exaggeration. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is a side-by-side. That's Biden at the debate. That's Biden yesterday. And there's no Photoshop. There's no editing. I swear to you, this is a real.
Who is that? Who is that Biden? You see these games they playing? Is that Joe Biden? We can't not trust these people no more. See, they want you to pay attention to the cake. They're all look at them. He needs all that makeup. Oh, we don't know who the hell is that under that goddamn makeup. What type of games is they playing, man? We can't put nothing past these people no more.
Image. And we are already seeing reporting from multiple mainstream media outlets that Biden's staff is apparently very upset with CNN because they're blaming the makeup artists for not putting enough makeup on him and appearing too pale and out of it. Right. It's the makeup people's fault. It's also apparently their fault that he didn't know which camera to look at, even though Trump somehow figured it out in the course of the debate. Interesting, right? That these are the excuses that we're coming up with. So Orange Man bad? Question mark. That's one that Cheeto Jesus and all of that perhaps will be changing. The Democrats and the center left will be changing their tune on that one. This funny part stuff, though, aside, there's some very serious stuff going on right now by the Biden campaign and the people behind him to try and shut down any conversation about him dropping out of the race. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is perhaps the most insane one, is that Democrats are currently weighing nominating Biden through the unofficial or through the official channels online to circumvent all of the talk of dropping him from the ticket. So you can see this from Bloomberg. A mid-July vote would formally tap Biden as the nominee as early as July 21st. The president's allies have pushed back then on the calls for replacement, and they believe that this would accomplish two birds with one stone. Number one is that it would qualify him for the ballot much earlier in several states, as opposed to having to wait a month. But number two is, look, it's July 2nd, 19 days. That's a long time, especially for an old man. But 2 months is way longer than that. It's a political eternity. So what they want to do is nominate him officially, and then it's over. You can't even attempt to have a broker convention or a contested convention. So this is as rigged as it gets, folks. Remember, they were already doing this because they were worried about Palestine protesters and uncommitted delegates disrupting the official nomination process. This means they would move it fully online even earlier to disrupt concerns about his age and any Israel-Gaza protests, and then make the convention a coronation as opposed to something that was actually contested. So this is a full-on conspiracy by Biden, his family, and his closest aides to ram this through as soon as possible. Let's go to the next part, please, because this shows us part of the push and pull of everything that is going on here. So, for example, Governor Whitmer, who has been hailed as some alleged replacement for Joe Biden, well, it turns out that the very day after the debate, Governor Whitmer of Michigan phoned Jennifer O'Malley Dillon. She is the campaign manager for the Biden campaign, to, quote, relay that Michigan, in the wake of the debate, is no longer winnable for Joe Biden. So look, any scenario where Biden doesn't win Michigan is basically game over. Remember, Biden won Michigan in 2020. Trump barely won Michigan in 2016. I think it was only like 10,000 votes or so. But he needs Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania to go in his direction, because right now, all polling in the world indicates that Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada are likely gone. Without those three so-called blue wall states, he's done. So if he's losing in Michigan, according to the sitting governor there, I don't even know what the hell this entire purpose of this is. You can nominate him early if you want, but then you're basically guaranteed to lose. There's also a lot of other stuff going on right now. For example, post-debate polls. This one is insane. It's shocking. Let's put this up there on the screen just to show you. In the state of New Hampshire, a new St. Anselm College poll shows Donald Trump at 44%, Joe Biden at 42%, RFK Jr. at 4%. Now, you would say, hey, but Biden's, he's pretty close there, right? Yeah, you shouldn't even be in the margin of error because he won the state by over 5 points last time around. It wasn't even supposed to be a battleground state. It hasn't been really looked at as a battleground state for a long time. Trump came kind of close in 2016, but look, that was the best possible circumstance for him, and he still barely lost it. So what are we doing here when Biden is trailing Trump in New Hampshire? This just puts all kinds of states on the map, which previously we weren't even thinking about. And let's go to the next part because we can just continue and roll down this. Ann Seltzer, we previously brought you her Iowa poll. Ann Seltzer is perhaps the best pollster in this entire country, the state of Iowa. She says that Donald Trump is up by nearly 20 points in Iowa. Why do we care? Yeah, Iowa's a red state. Because let's say the nearby states like Wisconsin, for example, that Trump obviously, or that Biden needs to win if he has any chance. Well, that means he's probably losing Wisconsin by 7 to 10 points. Then you've got here journalist John Ralston, pretty much the gold standard whenever it comes to Nevada politics. He says Biden is not only losing Nevada, but he is dragging the Democrats down ballot. Here's what he says. My thoughts here on New York Times Siena. This is a very bad poll for Joe Biden. I also think it is terrible for Jackie Rosen and Democratic House incumbents. I am not a huge fan of most Nevada polls, and this one certainly has anomalies, but Biden is losing here. So when John Ralston speaks, I'm listening, folks. And just over and over again, we are watching just really a meltdown, a national meltdown for Joe Biden at almost every level. And yeah, Biden has a 63% unfavorable rating in Nevada compared to Trump's 50. Nearly 2/3 here have an unfavorable view of the president. My goodness. Well, that's not all, folks, because already Republican candidates are picking up on the Biden debate performance, smacking Joe Biden and all of the Democratic candidates. Here, for example, is Dave McCormick in the state of Pennsylvania running against Bob Casey, another critical battleground state. Let's take a listen.
The worst debate I've ever seen in my entire life.
No two ways about it. That was not a good debate for Joe Biden.
Panic. Not just panic, it's pain.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So what do we do about this?
Everything we have to do is
What would you have Joe Biden do to make the case that he's not an elderly, well-meaning gentleman?
People are going to see it in the campaign.
No question he's prepared to do this job today and would be were he reelected.
One of my best buddies, very close friend, one of my closest friends, Bobby Casey.
I have a lot of confidence in his leadership. No question he's prepared to do this job today.
I mean, just take a look at that. You are going to see that at every single race for the next several months, which is just genuinely devastating for these folks. And it just makes it very questionable as to how you could be able to pull this out. So this is all the campaign debating polling that we have so far. I actually have one right in front of me, which just came out. So let me go ahead and read it to everybody because it is actually more of a counter signal and I want to be able to present the whole picture. This is from a Harvard-Harris poll. It says, among those who watched the debate, did the debate make you more or less likely to vote for Biden? Biden, less likely, 42%, no impact, 35%, more likely, 23%. Trump, more likely, 40%, no impact, 35%, less likely, 26%. So look, for Biden, you still got the biggest number there at 42% saying I'm less likely to vote for you. That is not good. I mean, that just shows you again how devastating it was, whereas it's only 26% Trump, 40% more likely there for more likely whenever it comes to Trump. You put all that together, and I'm just seeing a total wipeout that is happening on the campaign front. The bottom is falling out. That doesn't mean, though, that the Democrats aren't still going to try and rig the process and nominate him before the convention to shut down any of the conversation about dropping him off the ticket. Hey,
I'm sorry. I mean, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with U.S. allies to reassure them that Joe Biden is fit for the job. If you want to convince your allies or just the general public at large that the president is fit to serve, maybe you should have the president do that. The fact that Anthony Blinken has to do this says everything. The world was horrified when they saw the debate, and it was clear that the United States was ran by an emperor with no clothes. Blinken is busy telling the allies that one debate performance doesn't erase everything that Joe Biden accomplished.
The world knows, the world has experienced over 3.5 years, not one night, is exactly the kind of leadership that he's brought to bear on problems that are common for so many countries, particularly so many of the democracies around the world. There's a desire, there's a thirst for American.
Now this dirty, no good, small hat bastard is running this country. Him and his fellow small hats had the nerve to say, well, the world has been seeing Joe Biden's leadership. They just using Joe Biden as a rubber stamp while they do whatever the hell they want. Like when he went to Israel and said, he's not here as our Secretary of State. He's here as a Jewish guy. That's what he said. All this war they starting with Russia. Remember, these people hate the Russians.
An engagement for American leadership, even when we have disagreements with countries, they still want us in this and even leading to try to get to a better place. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is, again, people are looking at the last 3.5 years. They're looking at policies. They're looking at policy choices. And for the most part, they like the
President of the United States get classified secret top intelligence. Joe Biden is out of his mind. So guess what? All these people, even his wife, these people get to see that shit. These people have sworn allegiance to other nations. I'm not going to say right here, get my channel wiped out, but y'all already know who that is. These people, nobody ever paying attention to these people is going to have very secret classified data that you think they're going to, what you think they're going to do with that data? Who you think they're going to help with that data? That's disgusting, man. That's a scandal in itself.
The choices and the policies that this president is pursuing.
One debate is not enough to erase the fact that we armed and provided diplomatic immunity for a genocide. One debate isn't enough to erase the fact that we created a black market boom of guns around the world because we armed Nazis in Ukraine while provoking a nuclear power. Man, we should be most concerned about whoever is really making the decisions in the White House. The global fallout from this debate is truly hilarious. We have NATO that is furious over Biden's poor debate performance. It's funny because NATO makes it quite clear that they're not worried that Joe Biden is clearly not making the decisions on behalf of the White House. What they're really concerned about is that Joe Biden is providing comedy relief for Russian and Chinese state media. NATO is upset because Biden's poor performances has allowed Russia and China to paint Western leaders as weak and feckless. And my question is, are they wrong?
Time now to check in on lefties losing it in the media post that presidential debate, the one which made it impossible for them to hide their dude's cognitive decline. Yeah, after this mess, it's hard to pretend talk of Biden's befuddled state is some sort of right-wing conspiracy or due to out-of-context videos.
Move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
There were a lot of startling moments in this debate, including Biden's 15 lies and regurgitations of debunked myths, from the fine people lie to suckers and losers lie. But one moment that hasn't got the coverage it deserves is Biden's bizarro claim that women in America are being raped by their in-laws and their sisters.
Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, but here's the deal: there's a lot of young women are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There's a lot of young women being raped by their in-laws and brothers and sisters, and they try to arrest them when they cross state lines. He just said that. Whatever concoction of drugs they had him on, it did not work as planned.
When he was talking about that, that whole rant was about, they was talking about abortion. And he was trying to make a point that if a woman is victimized, she should be able to receive an abortion if that happened, if she were to get pregnant or something like that. That's what he was trying to communicate. He was also trying to debunk Trump in saying that a lot of the bad characters that were coming across the border under Joe Biden's watch were doing that to young ladies. So what happened at the park with the young lady who was raped and unalived by two illegal immigrants that they refuse to call illegal immigrants. They only want to call them undoctrinated citizens, undoctrinated humans. I don't know what the hell they want to call them. They are illegal immigrants because they are immigrants who are trying to come over into our country illegally. So it actually says what it is in the write-up. So you ain't even got to go too far to try to stretch it. But he completely fouled that up. But what he also was doing, he was taking up for the illegals. He was saying that, yeah, some of our women are being molested and murdered by them, but it's not a big deal. That's pretty much what he was saying. He was like, it's not big enough deal for us to always talk about it. Joe Biden, yes, it is. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. We have been teaching people how to grow online. It's been absolutely amazing. We have 3 people who have been able to reach monetization with the word coach. And the fact that he just dismissed it like that, that don't come from no place. That comes from the fact that the majority of people on the left, they dismiss it. They act like it does not exist. So that's something y'all need to pay attention to, man.
And he was thoroughly confused, not just when he gave what should have been well-rehearsed answers, but also when Trump was talking.
From prisons, people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now. All terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look.
Did he call him Brandon? Bro, he called him Brandon. Trump cold, bruh. Trump is cold. He called
Brandon, just speak to them. I just love Trump casually dropping a Brandon in the debate. And post-debate, the very folk who are regularly featured on this segment for losing it on their various programs were waking up to the reality that Biden's cognitive decline could no longer be hidden from their audience. Here's one of those lefties losing it, MSNBC's Joy Reid.
I, too, was on the phone throughout much of the debate with Obama world people, with Democrats, with people who are political operatives, with campaign operatives. My phone really never stopped buzzing throughout. And the universal reaction was somewhere approaching panic. The people who were texting with me were very concerned about President Biden seeming extremely feeble, seeming extremely weak. And
the lefties losing it were on just about every station and every online program and podcast, including the Young Turks.
This is an epic disaster. I see people online saying, well, okay, that answer wasn't so bad. No, it doesn't. Any particular answer doesn't matter at all. This thing is over. He looks like he's barely surviving. I don't mean the debate, I mean life. And so there's no person that has a single brain cell left in their head who thinks that Joe Biden is the best candidate to take on Donald Trump. And I will bet them any amount of money that Joe Biden's going to lose this election if he's the candidate. It's a guaranteed loss. You're telling me this is the most important election of our lifetimes? You're telling me that democracy's on the line, and you're gonna put on a guy who can't even talk, who can't even sit there and look normal. This thing's a bloodbath. He's gonna get annihilated. That is, okay, now the Democrats have to decide. Are they happy to lose? Are they willing to lose? Because this is a guaranteed loss.
This is so much worse than my worst nightmares of what it could be like in every way.
Oh, it's so fun. And there were more lefty tears on CNN.
He's doing the best that he can, but he had a test to meet tonight to restore confidence of the country and of the base, and he failed to do that. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to want to see him consider taking a different course now. We're still far from our convention, and there is time for this party to figure out a different way forward if he will allow us to do that.
Yeah, about that. I don't think Jill's going to allow it. She's the one who seems to be calling the shots, and she's telling Joe he did great.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the answers. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Whoop Joe Biden's ass. That's what Trump did. He whooped Joe Biden's ass. I'm sorry, was that the wrong answer? I'm sorry, let me let her say it the right way. Okay.
He's telling Joe he did great.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Whoop his ass. Oh man, this is embarrassing, bro. It's embarrassing. This is. Oh my gracious! You talking about elder abuse? If you're gonna arrest Trump for anything, you gotta arrest him for elder abuse because he whooped Joe Biden's ass. and you gotta arrest everybody on MSNBC, everybody on CNN. Jill, Dr. Jill. Yeah, you are culpable too. Okay, I'm gonna let her speak this last time. I'm gonna play it. I promise you, I'm not gonna say anything. Let her do her thing. All right.
He's telling Joe he did great.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Whoop your husband's ass. That's what he did. Sorry, Jill. That's what he did because your husband lied too. Politicians lie. Your husband is one. Trump is one. They spin things from time to time. But guess what? Who will make a better president? What did Trump do? He had a better 4 years as president. No, that's not the answer, guys. What did Trump do? He struck fear into other leaders around the world and made sure that there weren't any wars. Oh no. Okay. All right. What did Trump do? He made sure that gas prices and the economy was better when he was the president. I mean, we can go on and on and on. We can play this game all day, son. We can play this game all day. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. Okay, let's go through this one more time, and we're gonna hear what Trump did according to Jill.
He's telling Joe he did great.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Walk down the steps by himself without any help, anyone holding his arm, and he didn't pee on himself. What did Trump do? He actually acted like and showed us that he was mentally capable of being the president. That's what he did. That's why they didn't invite me, because I would have been like, okay, I got a whole list for you. So, all right. And he did this. And what else? We got some more stuff over here. I would have been naming things, bro. What did Trump do? He whooped your husband's ass.
Be king. They're, they are never going to tell him no.
This is not America. If you want to make America great again, you got to return to the rule of law. This decision today, unfortunately, is a blueprint on how to end the rule.
The Chief Justice says, and I read this in the last hour, that this is a chilling doom scenario that the dissenters are making, wholly disproportionate to what the court actually did today. And what assurance does anyone in America have that Supreme Court would ever tell this man no?
Basically, what you have here is the Supreme Court imposing its judgment that principle, that we must have bold and decisive presidents, is more important than the principle that Justice Sotomayor is advancing, which is we should have presidents who obey the law.
Wow, it's going to take a very long time for us to digest what this actually means.
I think politically, it's bad. It makes the Supreme Court look very partisan. They're supposed to be wearing these kind of black and white umpire jerseys or whatever. They look like they're wearing the MAGA hats.
Well, it's deeply disheartening, and there's really nobody who could claim that our founders, the people who wrote our constitutions, wanted a president to have this kind of power.
This is a real test. I'm concerned. It's a real test. If you have someone in office who has no respect for the law, no respect for Republican virtues, no respect for the Constitution, no respect for norms, and then you have a Supreme Court that says, well, you know what? We've never before had to look at whether you could commit crimes. The Supreme Court says there's some crimes you can commit. That's scary, man.
I don't know if I've ever seen you this emotional. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so scary.
It's a big step forward to having an authoritarian president. And I find it a sad moment that our Supreme Court came down with this ruling.
The Supreme Court is functioning, and it is basically giving a green light for criminal activity in the Oval Office under certain circumstances, which I think, given the present state of our country, is very, very scary.
I mean, sad day. It's 5-alarm fire. I mean, when you read Sonia Sotomayor's dissent, and she says, the president could have SEAL Team 6 kill a political rival.
You have to give me a moment. I'm all up in my feelings. I feel so bad for these people. No, I don't. Burn, bitches. Burn. It's over. And I'm done with you nuts. The only thing that's bothering me is I've got to wait 4 more months to really celebrate. I bet, like myself, you are absolutely loving this display of ever-flowing liberal tears. I can't. What? Wait. Oh, we have a little bit of breaking news.
Breaking news. We just learned Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is not opposed to delaying former President Trump's July 11th sentencing. This comes as President Trump attempts to set aside the verdict in this New York criminal trial on immunity grounds. But DA Bragg is not opposed to delaying that sentencing, which is scheduled for next week.
And I've got some more breaking news for you. While I've been making this video, even more news dropped. Judge Merchan pushed back the sentencing date, not to late July, as many people thought. He pushed it all the way back to September. Not really sure what's going on there. There really is no telling what's going on with this New York case, given all the appeals. Can the news get even worse for the Democrats? Actually, it can.
Or by the president's defenders that his age was also considered an issue 4 years ago.
You know, if you look at the polling now, compare it to what was pre-debate and compare it to what was 4 years ago, it's just not even on the same planet, Anderson. If you ask voters now, does Biden have the mental fitness, in fact, be president? Those numbers are incredibly low. The percentage who say he does not have the mental fitness, look at this. 72% say he does not have the mental fitness in order to be president right now. That's up from 65% pre-debate. But compare that to 4 years ago, the percentage of voters who said that Biden was too old. It was just 36%. That's half the level that we're looking at right now. These numbers are not anywhere close to being the same. 4 years ago, voters for the most part thought Joe Biden was with it. He could handle the job as president. You look at those numbers now. The fact is voters do not even see them on the same planet. They don't think Biden's with it. They do not believe he has the mental fitness to be president. And I have to be honest with you. I don't know how he wins with the numbers that we see right now. There is no precedent for the numbers that we're seeing right now for someone running for president, letting alone getting a nomination. These are the types of numbers, when you combine them with some of the numbers that we're seeing post-debate that show him trailing Donald Trump, these are the types of numbers that could end a campaign if he can't turn them around.
There is some comparison being made between Biden's first debate performance and Ronald Reagan's, and there were questions raised after Reagan's first debate performance. He came back with a second better one.
He came back with a second better one, but the fact is, if you look at the numbers that Ronald Reagan had after that first debate, the percentage of voters who said that Ronald Reagan was too old, look at this. It was just 27%. It was 27%. Age was an issue at 27%.
That was after
the first debate. That wasn't before the first debate. That was after the first debate. And I averaged 2 polls there. So it's not like we're just looking at one number back in 84. We're looking at 2 polls, average them together. There's 27% who said that Ronald Reagan was too old. Now that number for Joe Biden, who says that he doesn't have the mental fitness to be president, is well more than double. It's 72%. Ronald Reagan was able to recover in that second debate because voters were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The fact is, voters might have been willing to give Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt going into the first debate, but afterwards, I don't see it. All right.
I'm sure there's quite a few libnuts out there that want to give Dementia Joe the benefit of a doubt. Unfortunately, there's not enough of them. People who have real lives and have IQs over 50 absolutely realize it's over. And here's the reason why. Unfortunately, dementia is undefeated. He's not coming back. Joe has punched a one-way ticket. There's no recovery available for him. It's an incurable disease. It's not coming back. He is as good today as he will be. That's it. It's all downhill from here. The Democrats, unfortunately, have a candidate who is going to experience diminished functionality week after week. And there's nothing that anyone can do about it. All they had going for them was the big lie machine, and it got exposed during the debate. Even Nancy Pelosi is having questions about Dementia Joe right now.
So we have all these things that he was masterful in helping to orchestrate, to write, and to pass. So he has a vision, he has knowledge, he has judgment, he has a strategic thinking, and the rest. He has a bad night. Now, again, I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition?
There's been no announcement. They're keeping up the charade, trying to keep a good face. But at this point, it's not an if. It's just a matter of when they replace Joe Biden. Too many people are making noise. Too many polls show him, basically getting destroyed by Donald Trump. The buzzards are circling. It's over. Their only hope was that Donald Trump would go to jail. They really, really put their chips in based upon the fact that lawfare would take Trump out of the race. But it didn't work, and the dream is now gone. But over at MSNBC, they're still carrying the torch.
This election is no longer about the old guy that's in the White House now. Like, all the op-ed pages and the New York Times can run around and opine about, what Joe Biden should do. And,
I'm not sure why this guy is all pissed off, but you're what? Oh, it's not a guy. It's Joy Reid. This is Joy Reid's. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call her a guy. I thought it was a transformer. In any event, this is Joy Reid, a host on a major news station on MSNBC. This is Joy Reid bitching about SCOTUS today. You are not going to believe what she has to say.
Oh, y'all have fun with that. Enjoy yourselves, intellectual thought leaders. I no longer care. Doesn't matter to me anymore. It's above me now. It's above me now. There's a Waffle House next door. There's a Best Western next door as well. It's above me now. It's above Joe Biden now. Don't care about Joe Biden's age, infirmity, that he shuffle when he walked. I don't care.
She don't care about nothing right now. You know what she cares about? Burning it down.
He could be seated for the rest of from now to election day and never get up off a chair. He could sit down. He could roll down in a wheelchair. He could be on a skateboard, seated. I don't care. Donald John Trump cannot be allowed back into the White House.
That saying they say quite a bit. Donald Trump cannot be allowed back in the White House. Do you understand what that language means? They didn't say people shouldn't vote for him. She didn't say he shouldn't be elected. They said he should not be allowed in the White House. What are you going to do, Joy? How are you going to not allow an elected official to go into the White House? What exactly is it that you have up your sleeve that you think other people should do to stop him from claiming his office?
Because if you combine that madman with this court, two of whose members are insurrectionists one of whom flew an upside down flag at his home.
Again, gaslighting. Watch what they're saying. Insurrectionist. He's an insurrectionist. He's talking about Judge Alito. He flew an upside down flag at his home. Oh no, he flew an upside down flag. I'm terrified. My nipples hurt.
And blamed it on his wife, who's also crazy.
Oh, and his wife is crazy. You just insulted the man, and then you insulted his wife, and you're a host on a major news network.
The other of whose wife literally was part of the insurrection, and they ruled in this. They put themselves in the Leonard Leo 6. They went ahead and ruled on this with no shame. You combine this court, two of whose members are going to immediately resign and put 30-year-olds in there, including probably the guy who wrote the opinion in the Beaters case, meaning that Beaters should be able to get machine guns, which, by the way, they have now arrogated to themselves the power to decide all federal rules.
See, I told you that Chevron decision was huge, because now you can't have your little 3-letter agencies going out there and deciding who can do and how they can do it. They don't want to hear any of this. You hear what she just said. Now they decide that, we can't even have, these experts go out and decide for the American people how you should live your life. They don't want the Constitution.
Everything, whether your plane that you fly in is safe, how much carbon can be in the atmosphere, how much.
Do me a favor. When you're worried about carbon in the atmosphere, tell me why you didn't have a problem with Joe Biden flying back and forth to babysit Hunter. Tell me why John Kerry is flying all over the place. How come you don't have a problem with Mark Cuban having 7 jets? I bet you don't fly commercial.
Much filth can be in your water. They said agencies that have experts can't decide that. They will decide that. So they are kings, and Trump is king. You put him.
Oh, Trump is already king. Trump is king. So you're just admitting to the American people that Joe can't win. You just said it. They are kings, and Trump is king. Trump couldn't possibly be king. He doesn't want to be a king, but he couldn't possibly be a king if he wasn't already, insured to get to the throne. You're now saying he's already king. You're terrified, absolutely terrified. This nutbag I'm gonna just let her continue.
In the White House, combined with this court and a Republican House and Senate, we're done, y'all. All the rights that were won in the 20th century, the harder.
Who's this we? Because so far, she sounds like she's making a campaign ad for Donald Trump. We're done. No, we're not done. You're done? Nope, we're not done. So now she's going to segue into saying, they want to put us back in chains. She just said this. She goes, they want to put us back in the last century.
The rights of women, laborers, workers, the rights of children. Remember, child labor used to be illegal. The rights of Black folks, forget that. The rights of non-white immigrants, forget that. All of the 20th, they are trying to repeal the entire 20th century, and they're doing.
Can you believe this? I mean, I'm looking at some of you guys in the comments. She just said they're trying to repeal the 20th century. I can't even imagine what people in her audience are buying this crap. But she took the time to make this video to let y'all know how bad the Supreme Court decision was, that they're going to try and put you back in the 19th century.
Doing it fast. Between them and these crazy Republican governors, they are repealing the American century, the 20th century.
How do you do that? Maybe we should call Michael J. Fox and see if he's got the plan here. Maybe there's a hoverboard or a DeLorean that we can take back and forth in the future, because this woman is bat poop crazy. I mean, I knew she was crazy, but after this video, I said, I got to show my peeps this tonight. I got to show you guys this tonight.
Because they don't like it and they want back the 19th century. The century when super rich white men, unchecked and untaxed, amassed great wealth, passed it down with no taxation to their...
You mean like, I don't know, Joe Biden? You know, rich white men who ain't paying no taxes, who are passing their wealth around to their family through their 25 different LLCs with the money they're getting from all these other countries. You mean like that? Oh, because it sounds to me like you're saying it still goes on. You know, and it also is for white women, because I'm pretty sure that Nancy Pelosi is worth like $200 million. Oh, I think that Letitia James in the Bronx, but she's black, but somehow she got like 60 million. I heard Alvin Bragg is popping up at about 30 million. So it's not just the white people. It's not. If you go back a couple of centuries, nobody would, be happy with that. But you think that's what we want to do?
Descendants and pretended that they had earned it on their own, that they were just masters of the universe. They want that era back. They think that the 20th century was an abomination and they are dismantling it. They're coming for every single one of our rights. They're not done. They're not done. So if you love having your freedom, having the freedom for contraception, LGBTQ rights, that's going too. If you don't...
I told you this sounds like a Trump ad. If you're contraception and you're LGBTQ, it sounds like a Trump ad. Those are the rights she's worried about. She's not talking about the right for you to communicate without censorship. She's not talking to you about the right to basically go where you want and basically to buy what you want without the CB, digital currency coming in. She's not talking about that. She's talking about contraceptives and the 25-letter alphabet agency or organization that represent this much people.
Think they're coming for Obergefell? If you don't think they're coming for all these rights, then you are delusional. They're coming for all of it. They're dismantling the 20th century. They are repealing the 20th century. This ain't about Joe Biden anymore, y'all. It ain't about his policies. There are a lot of them I disagree with. There's a lot of them I disagree with deeply, morally. But it's above me now. It's above him now. You cannot allow Republicans to control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and the Supreme Court, and all of these states. You're now voting for your life. You must vote. Listen to Taraji P. Henson, y'all. Project 2025. They've now just implemented it from the court.
I don't even know what to say. Y'all probably thought if I just told you this, you'd have said, Barry, no, you're making this up. You're making it up, man. There's no possible way that this nutbag would have said this stuff. With her picture of Sotomayor in the background, the patron saint of the liberal justice department. Sotomayor, who's probably one of the dumbest people DEI hires ever. Don't even know how the Republicans let her get confirmed, but that's a whole nother story. But if I just told you she said this, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't have believed it.
You don't even need it now. If you have this court, plus Trump, plus the House, plus the Senate, plus all these states, y'all better vote for your lives in November. I'm gone. Y'all be good.
You can't keep getting away with it.
They've done so much gaslighting over at MSNBC, I think they're experiencing a contact high. But Joy Reid, she can conduct her performance art however she wants to. We all know that she's nothing but a paid operative. She's just Harry Sisson with a better tan and worse hair. As soon as the Democrats name a replacement for Dementia Joe, there can be no doubt Joy Reid will be 100% behind the new candidate. No doubt. No question in my mind. Everything you're seeing right now is seriously performance art. It's an act. They don't care. All they care about is who's going to pay me and can you beat Donald Trump. Joy Reid, like most everyone in the mainstream media, is just a paid mercenary. So everybody, for the next week or so, enjoy the show. The curtain is about to drop on Dementia Joe.
These
Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com. There's a big Supreme Court ruling. What you need to know about the Supreme Court immunity ruling in Trump's 2020 election interference case. They're giving him immunity.
What row?
So the Supreme Court's ruling Monday in former President Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case makes it all but certain that the Republican will not face trial in Washington ahead of the November election.
Great job.
By the way, YouTube insists we remind viewers that presidential immunity is completely effective in stopping the spread of corruption in politics.
It slows it down.
It does slow it. It doesn't stop it, but it slows it.
It doesn't stop transmission.
In a 6-3 ruling, the justices said that former presidents are shielded from prosecution for official acts, but do not have immunity from unofficial acts. The Supreme Court sent the case back to the lower court to determine whether core aspects of the indictment are unofficial versus official and therefore potentially shielded from prosecution. Here's what to know about the ruling and what comes next. By the way, the opinion. In the court's majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that while the president is not above the law, he also may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers. Therefore, Trump is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from a prosecution for his official acts, Roberts wrote.
I mean, since we let him off for the torture thing, the other ones.
I know, right? And the war things and the war crimes and the killing.
It's probably vital they make this decision because otherwise all those surviving presidents have to go to prison forever.
Forever. Barack Obama killed American citizens without he droned them. A kid, 16-year-old kid.
And don't even get me started on his chef's naked paddleboard trip.
That's right. The ruling means that special counsel Jack Smith cannot proceed with core allegations in the indictment, or must at least defend their use in future proceedings before the trial judge. The justices, for instance, wiped out Smith's use of allegations that Trump sought to leverage the investigative power of the Justice Department by ordering investigations into claims of voter fraud.
Wait, are you not supposed to leverage investigative
You're not
power
supposed to.
into fraud?
You're supposed to do. That's what it does not matter, the justice said, if the requested investigations were based on a sham allegations or based on an improper purpose.
Because we don't know till we do the
you don't know
investigation.
until you do the
we?
investigation. At the end of the day, the court said the president cannot be prosecuted for conduct within his exclusive constitutional authority. The justice said that the lower court must carefully analyze whether other allegations involve official conduct for which the president would be immune from prosecution. Boy, Teflon Don, he's the nonstick candidate, slipperier than Joe Biden in the family shower, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, because he doesn't have any actual real crimes.
That's right. I know.
I'm surprised as anyone.
I'm surprised as anyone, too.
But where are the actual crimes here?
Among the issues for further analysis is Trump's relentless badgering of then Vice President Mike Pence to not certify the electoral votes on January 6, 2021.
Oh, badgering.
What they neglected to say there, Kurt, was that Mike Pence actually likes being badgered when Trump puts on the furry suit and is a badger.
Yeah, Mike Pence is a deeply degenerate. You can see just by his squinchy face.
The justices said it was ultimately the government's burden to rebut the presumption of immunity in Trump's interactions with Pence and sent the question back to U.S. Court Judge Tanya Chutkan. The fake elector scheme. The justices also directed additional fact-finding on one of the more stunning allegations in the indictment, that Trump had participated in a scheme orchestrated by allies to enlist fake electors in battleground states won by Democrat Joe Biden, who would falsely attest that Trump had won in those states.
Okay.
This is a tough call for Democrats because they also use all of these tricks.
Did he even do this, by the way?
It's like two con men fighting to get to pretend who gets to be the long lost grandson.
I'm guessing they don't have a lot of evidence for any of this.
No. The Trump team had argued that the selection of alternate electors was in keeping with Trump's presidential interest in the integrity of administration on the federal elections, and cited as precedent an episode from 1876 in which Ulysses Grant sent federal troops to Louisiana and Mississippi to ensure that Republican electors got certified in those two cases.
By the way, if Biden Democrats did steal the election, do you think any of these fucking Democrats would care that it happened?
No.
They would lie and say they didn't.
The Smith team, by contrast, portrayed the fake elector scheme as a purely private action that implied no presidential duty. The conservative justices, in their majority opinion, didn't answer the question as to which side was right, instead saying that determining whose characterization may be correct and with respect to which conduct requires a close analysis of the indictment's extensive and interrelated allegations.
But this won't hold up to close analysis.
You know, there's a lot of people are going to be voting for Donald Trump simply because neither political side likes him.
Yeah.
It's like he's out to take revenge on politics in America overall.
If he convinces me he's going to put all of MSNBC and all these people in camps, I will register to vote for him.
I will.
If I can make me believe it in my heart. I don't believe it. I want him to do it. I want him to execute the generals like Sagar said.
Unlike Trump's interactions with the Justice Department, the justice said this alleged conduct cannot be neatly categorized as falling within a particular presidential function. The necessary analysis is instead fact-specific, requiring assessment of numerous alleged interactions with a wide variety of state officials and private persons.
Oh, they don't want to do that.
Trial timing. The ruling makes it nearly impossible that a trial could be held before voters decide whether to send Trump back to the White House. No pretrial preparations have taken place in more than 6 months since Chuckton put the case on hold in December to allow Trump to pursue his appeal. Wow.
Boy, The View made it seem like it was a slam dunk.
Chutkan had indicated she's likely to give the two sides at least 3 months to get ready for trial once the case returns to her court. That had left the door open to the case potentially going to trial before the election if the Supreme Court, like the lower courts, had ruled that Trump was not immune from prosecution. While with the Supreme Court ruling, however, the case could be tied up for months with legal wrangling over whether Trump's conduct was official or unofficial. The dissenters, 3 liberal justices, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and how do you say her name? Brown Jackson, sharply
Ketanji Brown Jackson, the woman who doesn't know what a woman is. Sharply criticized and thinks that censorship is good.
Sharply criticized the majority opinion in scathing dissents. In her minority opinion, Sotomayor expressed fear of our democracy and said the ruling wrongly insulates presidents as a king above the law.
Oh, now it's a problem, bitch?
Wow, that is scathing.
Wow. Hello, officer. I was brutally scathed.
Oh, boy, that is scathed. To the rest of us, that's just patty cake bullshit.
Oh, I got to put some aloe on that because the scathed
that's
was
so scathed.
It took the layer of skin off my entire body, the scathing.
Fear for our democracy in 2024 is like worrying about the pot roast for guests at the meteorite as the meteorite hits the planet. That's worry about your democracy.
Don't kill David Sirota movie ideas.
There is no democracy. Yeah, right. The dissenting justice said the majority decision makes presidents immune from prosecution for acts such as ordering Navy SEALs to assassinate a political rival, organizing a military coup to hold on to power, or accepting a bribe in exchange for a pardon.
Or covering up the Kennedy murder. The fuck? What is she talking about?
So what they're saying is, normal garden variety presidential shit.
Hey, Justice Sotomayor, are you not thinking ahead? The garbage deep state might want to hold on to control in the future, and this might make it hard. You moron.
Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relation between the president and the people he serves have shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law, Sotomayor wrote.
What? I'm sorry, I was getting my mandated vaccine. I didn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was getting. In a separate dissenting opinion, Jackson said the majority's ruling breaks new and dangerous ground.
Oh, are they going to define what a woman is?
So they're just noticing the chasm between presidential politics and the American people now?
Yeah. No, yeah, just now.
Have you heard about this new invention they just came up with? It's called the wheel.
Remember with Sotomayor is like, I like to think a wise Latina woman. Well, could you get one and replace Sotomayor?
Stated simply, the court now has declared the first time in history that the most powerful official in the United States can, under circumstances yet to be fully determined, become a law unto himself.
This is not okay. Wait, this is the first time they ruled on this. It can't be, because it has been that way since before I was born. Before I was born, they have been doing this. In fact, Richard Nixon declared it on a talk show, and everybody pretended to be mad, and then we went back to it.
Trump was convicted in May of 34 felony counts in his hush money trial in New York and is scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th. Each count of falsifying business records is punishable by up to 4 years behind bars, but there's no guarantee Trump will get prison time. Other possibilities include fines or probation. It seems almost certain that Trump's 2 other criminal cases will not go to trial before the election.
Oh, I bet they'll find a way. I bet they'll find a way to try to do something.
So, but that's what they're going after Trump for paying a hush. Again, we already showed you that Hillary, this crazy, and even Andrew Cuomo said that that case should have never been brought, and the only reason it was ever brought was because the defendant was Donald Trump.
I wonder if Andrew, after he was the receiving end of some Me Too's because we don't like you now, if he came around on, oh, maybe you shouldn't have bullshit. And also the other Cuomo who got fired from his job, who was all Mr. Me Too.
I mean, prosecuting, yes, right?
And by the way, if you paid a whore to shut up, that just sounds smart.
That's just right.
A lot of whores talk too much.
But saying, you talk about perfect sense. I mean, try prosecuting Trump for that. It makes perfect sense in the same world that has masturbating men on bicycles riding past children's in a parade.
Well, it's a pride parade. We can't be proud of riding a bike and jerk. I don't know how to do that. I'd like a president who could ride a bike and jerk off.
An appeals court recently halted Trump's Georgia 2020 election interference case while it reviews the lower court's judge ruling allowing Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis to remain on the case. No trial date has been set in that case. No kidding.
No.
Okay, Fani Willis, of course, can remain on the case even though she lied under oath.
I think her boyfriend should stay on.
Me too.
He's great.
That's absolutely perfect that she can remain on the case. When you have corrupt people making a corruption investigation against a corrupt individual who still isn't as corrupt as the ones investigating him.
Yeah, really incredible.
Trump was supposed to go to trial in May in another case brought by special counsel Jack Smith over classified documents found at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate after he left the White House. But the U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon canceled the trial date as the case got bogged down with legal issues.
What?
Were some of those legal issues that the FBI was planting evidence?
Bogged down.
Was that some of the bogged down?
That's the worst when trials bogged down
No,
with
they get
legal issues.
Legal issues.
That's amazing.
Issues that the FBI was lying and planting evidence.
Is that the fake photograph what they're trying to refer to?
Yes. And they're going after him for a records thing. But not Joe Biden because he's too old.
Hey, what were these records? I remember Crystal Ball. It could be nuclear things. Oh,
she is such a clown.
Will you tell us what? Oh, we don't get to know what they are. I don't give a fuck if he took them then. I hope he gave them to everybody.
Me too.
They shouldn't have any secret.
Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas.
Today, details finally emerged of yesterday's missile strike on a military airbase in the city of Mirad, Poltava region. While military experts and analysts were studying footage of a missile attack on this military airfield, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially stated that the Russian military used several Iskander-M ballistic missiles with a cluster warhead to destroy targets at this strategically important military facility, and that all of them successfully hit their targets.
Oh, they remember this should continue for NATO.
Combat crews of the Iskander operational tactical missile system carried out a group missile attack on a military airbase in the city of Mirad. As a result of this missile strike, 5 Su-27 fighter jets were destroyed, and 2 more fighters of the same model, which are under repair, received critical damage, the Russian military department said. It is reported that the armed forces of Ukraine used all these destroyed fighter jets to attack Russian positions with the help of British and French air-to-surface cruise missiles. Moreover, the Russian military also officially confirmed the destruction of 14 Ukrainian high-ranking officers, among whom were pilots of American F-16 fighter jets, who had received special training in Western countries. Thus, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation refuted the statements of some Russian telegram channels, which reported that Iskander-M ballistic missiles destroyed 2 and damaged 4 units of Su-27 fighter jets at the military airfield in Mirad. In addition, official representatives of the Russian military department also reported that Russian air defense systems shot down a Ukrainian MiG-29, Su-27, and Bayraktar unmanned aerial vehicle in the zone of a special military operation. According to the Russian military, all this happened within a day, immediately after the missile attack on the military airbase in Mirad. Commenting on this situation, military experts from numerous Western analytical centers admitted that the loss by the armed forces of Ukraine of 9 active combat fighter jets as well as experienced pilots further worsened the plight of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield. In addition, Western experts once again drew attention to the fact that Ukraine's air defense systems did not notice the presence of a Russian reconnaissance drone, which for 20 hours was running circles around the military airbase in Mirad. It is also worth noting the fact that during the strike of Iskander-M ballistic missiles, the Ukrainian air defense systems did not even try to shoot them down. All this indicates that the constant massive Russian missile strikes on the territory of Ukraine have already given results. As you can see, as a result of these massive missile attacks, dozens of Western and Ukrainian air defense systems were destroyed, as a result of which the Ukrainian military is now unable to shoot down even Russian reconnaissance drones. Many Western experts regretfully admitted that the Russian military managed to completely weaken the Ukrainian air defense, as a result of which even massive Russian reconnaissance drones now move around the territory of Ukraine absolutely freely and with impunity.
Can't use these American weapons, these German, well, not German yet, but these French weapons, British weapons, the Scalp and the Storm Shadow missiles, the ATACMS missiles, HIMARS missiles. They can't use them without the intelligence provided by the United States. And that intelligence, because of the complexity of the guidance and control systems, can't be inputted into the weapon systems without the technical assistance of the French, the British, the Americans. So the Russians know for a fact that the United States played the essential role in this attack that resulted in hundreds of Russian civilians being wounded and a score being killed, including 5 children, 1 2 years old, 1 8 years old, and others. This is an attack that Russia isn't going to walk away from. This is one of those decisive moments of the war. It changes dramatically the Russian political approach to how it will deal with what it considers to be, American malfeasance, American murder of Russian civilians.
Did someone in the Pentagon decide affirmatively that this projectile filled with cluster bombs would make its way to a Russian beach?
Well, they knew definitively that it would overfly a Russian beach. I believe that the target was a Russian military airfield that was further downrange on Crimea. But that, again, we're missing the point. We're not seeing the forest for the trees. What happened on the beach in Sevastopol is a tragedy. Civilians were killed. But the United States authorized Ukraine to attack Russia using an American weapon. That's the only point relevant to the Russians. The fact that civilians died is just, a continuation of the tragedy of conflict. America attacked Russia. That's all we need to talk about. It doesn't matter that the cluster bombs landed on a beach or on an airfield. America attacked Russia. And from the Russian perspective, that's not tolerable, nor will it be tolerable from the American perspective if Russia attacked the United States. If Russia wanted to hit an American airfield in Florida, let's say Homestead Air Force Base, but instead the Russian missile was intercepted over Miami Beach and Russian cluster munitions fell down on civilians, killing some, wounding hundreds of others, it's not that sets America off, although it should be. It's the fact that Russia attacked America.
Got it.
That's what sets us up. America attacked Russia, and there's no other way to see this event.
How has this event altered Russian military preparedness?
Not at all. This was a political decision. Russia is a mature nation state. Russia understands what war is. War is give and take. You will suffer casualties. Ukraine will strike Russian bases. Ukraine will continue to destroy Russian equipment. Ukraine will continue to kill Russian soldiers in large numbers. Russia's not an immature nation. Russia's not a nation that shies away from the reality of war. Russia is fully engaged in this conflict within the limitations set by their own political objectives, which fall short of full-scale war. But Russia has always been prepared to wage this war of attrition. And a war of attrition assumes that you are going to suffer losses as well. Vladimir Putin, in his recent discussions at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, spoke of, at the current time, the ratio of deaths being 5 to 1. For every 5 Ukrainians, 1 Russian's being killed. Now, sometimes he spoke a while back that it was 10 to 1. Some Russian leaders have spoken on occasion at the highest rate of attrition being 21 in favor of Russia. But the bottom line is there's always that 1. No matter what the Ukrainian number is, there's that 1. And 5 to 1, when Russia is killing 2,000 Ukrainians a day, you just take 2,000, divide by 5, and I think the number's 400. That's 400 a day. Remember, at the height of the Vietnam War, we were bringing home 200 a week, 200 dead Americans a week, and that broke the spirit of America. The Russians are suffering 400 guys dead a day. And this is horrific from the Russian standpoint. They're prepared to absorb these casualties. This is why they're recruiting 30 to 50,000 men a month to go to war against Ukraine, against NATO, against the West. Russia's more than prepared to deal with this. This doesn't alter anything. It alters the politics of this. Russia cannot allow the United States to get away with directly attacking Russia. Yes, we're using a Ukrainian proxy, but this is an American weapon system that America targeted, that America gave political permission to point. This attack could not have taken place without American permission.
Who in America would have given permission for it?
The President of the United States gave permission for this, not necessarily this particular attack, but the President of the United States said, I give the green light for Ukraine to use American provided weapons to strike targets inside Russia. This falls straight across Joe Biden's desk, and everybody below him gave a concurring opinion.
Does did the fury amongst Russian people animated by this event? Does that fury still exist?
100%. But it's not just the Russian people. You do know that the Russian Foreign Ministry called in the American ambassador
Yes.
and issued a demarche. And the
Yes.
fury was made apparent there because that ambassador was scared to death when she left that meeting. She went back to the embassy and fired off a cable that said, we're in deep trouble because Russia's no longer talking about the potential. Russia will retaliate. And Russia's at the point of taking this retaliation to the next level. And then that was communicated to the State Department, which immediately got on the ring with Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, who immediately picked up the phone and called his counterpart, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Belousov, and had a conversation in which Belousov listened and then said to him, "We blame you. We hold you accountable. We will retaliate. That's a guarantee." The United States is very concerned about this right now. This takes this conflict to a different level. And just to remind people, to show the level of concern, Vladimir Putin has now ordered Russia to begin building short-range and intermediate-range missiles to be armed with nuclear warheads to be targeted against Europe. This is the treaty that I was involved in. We got rid of those weapons. Those weapons weren't threatening Europe or the United States for decades because of the work that I did and because of the stupidity of the Biden administration. Because it was Trump that withdrew from the INF treaty, but Russia said, okay, but we're not going to take that step. We're not going to begin producing these weapons unless you introduce them into Europe. Well, Joe Biden introduced them back in September of last year in a training exercise in Denmark. But even then the Russians went, we don't want to take that step. Thanks to the stupidity of the American leadership that authorized Ukraine to strike a target in Crimea using the ATACMS missile, Russia's now going to open up the production lines, begin building these missiles. And now, if you think about it, Russia, by complying with its treaty obligation, they had missiles, ground launch missiles that could go 300 miles. That strikes a number of countries in the periphery of it. But now Russia will be building missiles that strike all of Europe with nuclear warheads. Thank you.
Here's President Putin yesterday, Scott, discussing this very subject matter, cut number one.
We declared in 2019 that we would neither manufacture nor deploy these missiles until the United States does so. In certain parts of the world, it is understood today that the United States not only manufactures these missile systems, but has also transported them to Europe for drills, specifically to Denmark. Recently, it was announced that they have arrived in the Philippines. It remains unclear if they've removed these missiles. We need to respond to this situation and determine our next action steps. It appears that today we will be discussing the Russian Federation's next moves concerning a one-sided halt on deploying land-based intermediate range and shorter range missiles.
Exactly what you were talking about. Before I ask you to analyze what he just said, I want to ask you what I've asked you several times in the past. Does the United States understand Russia, Putin, Lavrov, the defense minister, the Kremlin, the Russian mentality?
No, we used to. I mean, that's why we had the treaty that I played a critical role in implementing. We understood the Soviet Union, but to understand the Soviet Union, you had to understand Russia. We had quality ambassadors like Jack Matlock, like Chaz Freeman, who I believe you've interviewed. We had quality military officers who were trained foreign area officers, experts in the Soviet Union, experts in Russia. We understood Russia. Therefore, we understood the need to talk to Russia, to negotiate with Russia, and come up with treaties designed to reduce the potential of conflict with Russia. Today, we don't have anybody in the U.S. military or the U.S. State Department trained to that level because we stopped respecting Russia back in the 1990s, and we've allowed a mindset that minimizes Russia, that perpetually puts Russia down, that prevents a genuine discourse of Russia because of the Russophobia that we have injected into the mainstream American public. We don't understand Russia, so we continue to take actions that miscalculate how Russia will respond. We have literally gone back to square one. I invite your audience, please go back and look at the late 1970s, early 1980s. There was a reason why Americans put 1 million people into Central Park in June of 1982, because we were scared to death of the intermediate nuclear forces we were getting ready to deploy and how Russia would respond. And we understood that we were literally on the brink of nuclear annihilation. That's why Ronald Reagan signed that treaty on December 8th, 1987, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. That's why I spent 2 years in the Soviet Union helping getting rid of these weapons so that we didn't have to worry about this. We've gone back to square one. We're back to where we started, ladies and gentlemen, and that was a very, very dangerous place to be. Thank you, Joe Biden.
Who abrogated the treaty?
Donald Trump.
And why did he do that? Well, why? Because Mike Pompeo told him to. What was the thinking behind the people that advised him to do that?
The United States intelligence community, again, because we don't have good communications with the Russians, detected the testing of a sea-launched missile and interpreted that to mean that it was a ground-launched missile being tested in violation of the treaty. The Russians said, no, you got this wrong. We're willing to work with you. And that the Russians actually put out a display where they put the missile that we were calling a long-range missile violation there and said, come in and look at it. We should have gone and visited. Instead, we banned our people from visiting. We could have used the INF treaty mechanisms to get greater access to the system. Russia was ready to play ball. We weren't interested because we knew we were lying. We were looking for an excuse to get out of this treaty, not because of Russia per se, but because of China. We were concerned that China was getting a strategic advantage in intermediate range missiles that China could produce because they weren't part of the treaty, but the United States couldn't because we were bound by this treaty. I just want to remind people that say, well, that makes sense. One of the conditions we placed on the Soviet Union with the INF Treaty is they could not retain SS-20 missiles in the Pacific theater, which they believed they needed to offset Chinese capabilities. We said when you get rid of intermediate nuclear forces, it has to be all the missiles, and the Soviet Union went along with it. Instead of keeping 120 missiles to offset Chinese capabilities, they got rid of everything. Because that's what the treaty demanded. So we demanded it of the Soviet Union. Now, when the situation becomes complicated for the United States in the Pacific, we decided that the treaty wasn't inconvenient. And so we got out of it, not believing that Russia would react the way that they have. And indeed, as Putin said, they weren't going to react. Russia understands the danger of intermediate range missiles. Russia was not seeking to employ these missiles to produce these missiles. But because of the actions of the United States, Russia is now undone everything that myself and hundreds of others Americans, hundreds of others of Russians worked so hard to achieve. The elimination of an entire category of nuclear weapons from the American and Russian arsenals, that's done. America has brought it back, and now Russia has too. We're back to stage one, a very dangerous situation.
And the Biden administration obviously doesn't understand this since they exacerbated what Trump did.
The Biden administration doesn't take Russia seriously, and that's the problem. They're learning because everything we've done with Russia has led to a worsening situation. Imagine if we had actually implemented Minsk like Russia asked us to do back in June of 2021 when Biden met with Putin in Geneva. Imagine if Biden had kept his promise, because he said, I promise I will instruct Tony Blinken to implement Minsk. But he knew he was lying because we were using Minsk as a shield to build up a Ukrainian military to attack the Donbass and push the pro-Russian forces out of the Donbass. We were lying the entire time. Imagine if we had sat down with the Russians in December 2021 when they put forward a draft treaty that talked about how to prevent a conflict in Ukraine, to create a new European security framework that was equitable to all parties. Imagine if we had done that. Imagine if we had taken advantage of Russia's proposal for peace with Ukraine that Ukraine was ready to accept in April of 2022. Imagine if we had done that, this war would be over. Russia wouldn't have built up the strongest military. Their military would still be at 900,000, not over 2 million now, and growing. They wouldn't have retooled their entire defense industry. They wouldn't have perfected their mechanisms of mobilization, and they wouldn't be deploying intermediate and short-range nuclear missiles back into Europe. Imagine if we had just taken Russians seriously. We have failed across the board. We don't understand Russia, and Russia reacting, not being proactive, reacting to our provocations has become the most significant player on not just the European stage, but the global stage when it comes to strategic issues.
Imagine if we had a Secretary of State that spoke with his opposite number. Imagine if we had a Secretary of State who was taken seriously. Imagine if we had a White House that understood the Russians. We obviously don't. So back to my question earlier about Sevastopol. Has this put pressure on President Putin to do the type of things that we just heard him say he's going to do and that you have been describing? And B, does it put pressure on President Putin, I'm going to use his phrase now, to finish the task, meaning to end the war?
Any pressure being put on Putin comes from inside Russia. That's where the real pressure is.
Right.
We could be putting pressure on Putin if we had diplomatic relations with Russia worth a damn, excuse my language. Right now, we have an American ambassador who just sits there in Russia, provoking Russia, and she's become insignificant. She's now simply a conduit for what limited communication exists between Russia and the United States. Putin faces pressure inside Russia to get this task done in a timely fashion. But Putin has wisely decided that while it's politically inconvenient for him to have this conflict continue, strategically, every day this conflict takes place, Russia gets stronger. We weaken NATO, we fracture NATO, we are destroying the NATO armies that have been built up at hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cost inside Ukraine. Russia's military gets stronger, their economic posture gets stronger. Russia has built an economic machine that thrives under economic sanctions, and Russia's geopolitical position gets stronger because it's the West that's becoming increasingly isolated, not Russia. So from Putin's perspective, there's no need to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of Russians that wouldn't die if he didn't push for an immediate military victory. Russia could win the war this summer. Russia knows this. Russia just put the pedal to the metal and push forward. But this could not only cause increased Russian casualties that they don't need to suffer, it could lead to an expansion of the conflict with NATO, which Russia is assiduously trying to avoid. Russia wants to win this war without expanding the war. And for that, Putin is willing to allow this war to drag out, longer than could be if he wanted to win the war now. Russia's under no significant pressure, real pressure, to alter the course of its of what it's doing in Ukraine today. They're winning every single day this war continues.
How decimated is the Ukrainian military, no matter what Joe Biden sends there?
They are incapable of meaningful. As I said, Russia today, if they put the pedal to the metal, could take the Ukrainian military off the map. But the Ukrainian military is capable of fighting, resisting. I always remind people that the United States in its fight against Nazi Germany, the bloodiest month of that war was April 1945, the last full month of the conflict. It wasn't June 1944 D-Day. It wasn't December, the Battle of the Bulge. It was April 1945, the last month of the war, when the German army was defeated. But the German army continued to resist hard. There was a lot of hard fighting, and we lost more men in that month than we lost in any other month. Russia could win this war right now, but they would lose a lot of men that Putin has made the decision he doesn't want to lose.
Is the United States planning to put 12 or 15 military bases in Finland?
The Finns have opened up 12 to 15 of their military bases for use by the United States. I think what the United States will do is go in and do a survey of these bases, determine which ones meet their needs. And while we may not be permanently deploying troops into Finland, at least not in significant numbers, We have to, now that Finland's part of NATO, we have to have a plan for reinforcing Finland. One of the things the most recent NATO exercise showed is that Finland, it's impossible to reinforce Finland right now. They're isolated. That's the stupidity of the Finns joining an alliance that can't come to their rescue if there's a war. So this is why NATO now is talking about the need to create a strategic connectivity between ports in Norway that go through Sweden into Finland so that American troops can disembark in Norway and make their way across. And once we can do that, then the American troops will have to fall in on logistics infrastructure in Finland. And that's what these 12 to 15 bases are, is a place where we can forward deploy some equipment, where we can have some connectivity, some arrangements, operational arrangements, so that when we come there, we're familiar with the terrain, we're familiar with the Finnish troops, and we can have a joint plan of action. So that's what the Finns are doing. They're talking about opening it up so that America and NATO can flow in when if the time ever comes. But, A, that's going to be horrifically expensive. B, that line of communication is going to be vulnerable to Russian interdiction. So C, the troops we think we're going to get to those 12 to 15 Finnish bases won't arrive in any significant numbers if there ever is a war.
Isn't it a provocation that we're that close to the Russian border?
Let me put the question to the people of the United States. Would it be a provocation if Russian troops are that close? What if Russia decided to create 12, or Mexico said, we're going to open up 12 to 15 bases along the southern border with the United States? And Russia went, oh, super. Yeah, we'll plan on deploying 40,000 troops there. Let's do some exercises. Do you think the United States would go, don't worry about that. That's not a bit. We'd be in full panic mode. Russia's not in panic mode, but it is of concern to Russia.
It's a provocation beyond dispute. Let's get back to Ukraine again before we leave. Is there any legitimate, bona fide, legal, valid government in Ukraine to negotiate with the Russians, even if that were such negotiation were in the cards?
I don't like to get involved in telling other nations, sovereign nations, how they get to pick their governments. There is a case that can be made that because Ukraine is a nation at war of an existential nature, that having normal elections would be impractical and indeed impossible, and that the Ukrainian government has every right to suspend elections and push forward with what is in effect a civilian/military dictatorship. Zelenskyy rules by martial law with a Ukrainian parliament that plays no meaningful role in government today. You could make that case. The problem is then when you overlay reality onto that theory, that case falls apart when you realize the extent to which the United States and Great Britain are pulling the strings, to which NATO and the European Union are influencing this government. You can't speak of the Zelenskyy government as a truly sovereign government capable of making genuinely independent decisions. And so from the Russian perspective, and from the perspective of other nations, the Zelenskyy government lacks the authority to speak on behalf of the Ukrainian nation, because it has become little more than a puppet of Western influence. So the Russians have said that when the time comes to negotiate the end of this, they will negotiate with a partner that isn't named Zelenskyy, a partner that isn't controlled or dominated by the West. And so that's where we're at. I think Zelenskyy undermined his credibility as a leader of Ukraine by foregoing elections. People can say all they want about it, but elections have been held in nations at war before. The United States held elections during World War II, during the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln was at greatest peril. He held an election, ran against General McClellan, one of his generals who was critical of Lincoln's approach to the conflict. So truly democratic nations find a way to preserve their democratic character by holding elections in a time of conflict. Even though I'm not a big fan of the Iraq elections that took place in 2005, the fact is we, the Americans, recognized the absolute necessity to have an election in Iraq at a time when it was being torn apart by internal sectarian strife, to avoid the the path of least resistance by saying, we can't really have an election here. And you know what happened in 2005? The Shia majority won the election, even though we didn't want them to. That's the risk. That's the danger of having an election of democratic nature, is that sometimes the people vote and they choose a path that the outside manipulators don't want. And I think the fear of
there were an election in Ukraine and they elected a president who respected Putin and whom Putin respected, and they sat down and negotiated an agreement. It wouldn't be the agreement that Boris Johnson scuttled, but it'd be a lot better than continued.
Yeah, if there was an election in Ukraine, it's almost guaranteed that the president to emerge from that wouldn't be named Zelenskyy, and the parliament that emerged would be a parliament that would be more receptive to a negotiated peace settlement, which is why there isn't an election in Ukraine. It's not because of a decision Zelenskyy made. It's because of a decision the United States and Great Britain made.
Yeah, here is President Zelenskyy lamenting a little bit, talking about the dead and wounded, and for the first time about the need for negotiations.
So we have to find and to prepare this plan and to put this plan on the table during months. We don't have too much time because we have a lot of wounded and dead people on the battlefield and through civilians. That's why we don't want to have this war during years. So that's why we want to prepare this joint plan, put it on the table to the second peace summit.
I don't think it's going to get anywhere, but it's the first time I've seen him lament the sorry state that he has allowed Ukraine to devolve into in such a public way. He can't last. His government can't last. Their military can't last much longer. Can they make it to Christmas?
Well, I mean, again, the question there is what Russia's willing to do to drive the stake through the heart. And Putin has made it clear that he's not willing to sacrifice a significant number of Russian casualties that don't need to be sacrificed, that as long as NATO and Ukraine want to play this attrition game, look what's happened in Kharkov. The Russians came in, took high ground north of Kharkov, dug in, and now Ukraine is just compliantly throwing all of their reserves into a futile counteroffensive that's getting destroyed. In Chasiv Yar, the Ukrainians have dug into a city and they're getting blown apart. This is why Zelenskyy is saying what he's saying, because every time he engages the Russians decisively, his army gets chewed up and spit out, dead. The Russians suffer casualties. Of course they do. The Ukrainians are brave soldiers. They're fighting very bravely, but they're dying. The Russians are going to do that which is necessary to keep the Ukrainians dying at a casualty ratio that is favorable to Russia. That is how you demilitarize Ukraine. And as a result, you get the result we just saw. A defeated Ukrainian leader finally being confronted with the reality that the cavalry is not coming, that they're going to have to find a way to resolve this issue. He still lives in fantasy land. He speaks of a second peace summit. He speaks of, imposing Ukraine's will on Russia. As the Russians have said, as Vladimir Putin said, the best offer Ukraine's ever going to get that was already put on the table. And at some point in time, probably after the NATO summit, if Ukraine refuses to pick that up, then the next time they meet, it won't be called a summit. It'll be called the unconditional surrender of Ukraine, where Russia will dictate far different terms that'll be far worse for Ukraine. And frankly speaking,
there are reports this morning that Viktor Orban is in Kyiv delivering a message from President Putin.
I think probably delivering a message from Viktor Orban and maybe indirectly from an empowered European political opposition. I don't know if people understand the relevance and significance of what happened in France. The first round of parliamentary elections, Macron's party got trounced by the far-right party. While the far-right party hasn't quite taken control of the French parliament, the bottom line is all that talk that Macron was doing about intervening, siding with, getting strong, is gone, finished. France has been neutered, literally neutered. France is going nowhere. Germany, likewise, is in a very difficult position. Europe cannot sustain. In the United Kingdom, we have an election coming up on Thursday that could change, their ability to back up the rhetoric that they put out. The European front, in terms of supporting Ukraine, is collapsing rapidly. And one of the reasons is because of people like Viktor Orban and others who have taken a stance saying that's not the direction we want. I think Orban is going there telling Zelenskyy that, you've got to change your evil ways, baby, to quote the Santana song. But the other thing is that Orban, I think, is empowered by what's happening in Europe now to lay the law down for Zelenskyy too. There's a significant Hungarian population in Ukraine. And right now, this mobilization that Zelensky's doing is impacting this population. They are being rounded up and sent off to die at the front. And I think Orban, now looking at the change in political situation, now feels empowered to come in and dictate to Zelenskyy, cease and desist, where that part of Ukraine may not be part of Ukraine when things start to go south for you. Hungary has an interest in those people, and if you can't take care of them, we will.
Scott Ritter, terrific analysis, my dear friend. Thank you very much. As always, a happy Independence Day to you and your family. We'll see you next week.
We should ask this question to Gerasimov, if we had the chance.
I would love to interview Gerasimov.
It's impossible, Judge. He doesn't give interviews.
Right.
Once in a while, he talks in Russia to somebody he trusts. There are not many in Russian media, but it's Putin and Gerasimov. These are the only two that really know. They know when they look at the chessboard in Novorossiya. Of course, it's the same old story, one village a week, sometimes 2 villages a week. So this could go on forever. They know that they could have a window of the next few months to accelerate businesses. Nobody in Moscow knows for sure if they will. And of course, when they look at the political situation, they see a new toxic trio ahead in Europe. That batshit crazy Estonian, whose dad was very comfortable in the last days of the former Soviet Union. The Dutch Gudam, the new NATO Secretary General, and the NATO summit is next week, by the way, in DC. And of course, Ursula von der Leyen 2.0. So obviously, Russophobia and European dementia will continue. And of course, when they look at what's going on in Washington, it's fascinating because they're puzzled. They are analyzing all possible scenarios. For instance, when Tucker Carlson as a post is reproduced all over the spectrum in Russia, when Tucker is saying Biden is done. Well, not necessary. You know better than I do. And we have that lady who just posed for the cover of Vogue in August, Dr. Jill, which is maybe the acting president of the United States at the moment, saying that nothing's going to change. So it's impossible to predict what the Russian general staff is going to do in this window of the next few months. But they are on a position of sitting back, relaxed, and enjoying the total debacle around.
What is the situation with Estonia? And why did you refer to the head of the country as you did?
Because she is an extreme Russophobe, extreme. And of course, she lies as well. She's saying that her family was persecuted during the Soviet Union. Not at all. You just look at what happened to her. And photos have been leaked and the biography of her dad has been leaked as well. Very, 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 very comfortable. So it was very easy to appoint her because she falls into this ideal configuration of NATO, according to Washington, where you have essentially DC, London, Warsaw, and the Baltic Chihuahuas, the leaders of the new NATO, and not France and Germany, which are the natural leaders of the European Union. So it's very easy to appoint her. And this was behind closed doors, by the way. I remember we talked a few weeks ago that there would be a private dinner in Brussels where Ursula von der Leyen would be reconducted. That's exactly what happened. And they also decided on Callas as head of the EU foreign policy. It's a woman that has zero background on international relations, doesn't know anything about diplomacy, doesn't know anything about political science, and of course allied with von der Leyen. She's a sort of let's say a crypto protege of von der Leyen in the European Commission. So
Chris, put her picture up again, please. Is this the person of whom you're
yes,
speaking?
Yes, Kaja Kallas, absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So she's the head of Estonia, and she is a fierce.
Yes,
and she's now the head of foreign policy for the EU.
She'll be the head of foreign policy for the EU. So if you thought that Joseph Garden Jungle Borrell was okay, no adjectives. I don't even need them. Wait for Callas.
Wow.
And even worse, because in terms of Borrell had let's say a vague knowledge of international relations on a European level. He didn't know anything, for instance, about Africa, Latin America, or Eurasia. Callas is, she doesn't even know what's going on inside Europe. Can you imagine the rest of the world? So these are the people who believe in the EU foreign policy ahead. The Russians are, they're taking it in a very blasé way. They were expecting something like this. You know?
Are the Russian people still furious over what happened on the Sevastopol beach 2 Sundays ago, or has that anger begun to subside?
No, Judge, they are still furious. And there is a raging debate in the corridors in Moscow, and among analysts, among military analysts, among businessmen of, okay, is this finally the ultimate red line, and what's going to happen? Well, a hint. Bolusov, the new Minister of Defense, said, in fact, he ordered the General Staff to take measures, concrete measures, about the loitering US drones in the Black Sea. So something pretty rash will happen sooner or later, or we are in between already. And following public opinion, in fact, in following the kind of the key op-eds that we see in Russian newspapers, and of course, if you look at Solovyev's show at night in Russia, which is watched by the whole Russia. In fact, most of the analysts talking to Solovyev, they are pretty, okay, let's go for it. We don't care what the Americans say. We don't care what the Americans will do.
Does this put pressure on President Putin and Gerasimov to do something dramatic and obvious?
It does, but they won't do anything dramatic, obvious, impulsive, irrational, or tending towards irrationality. No way. These are very measured characters, extremely strategic. I'll give a short example related to what's going to happen tomorrow,
please.
Which is extremely important, Judge. Tomorrow is the beginning of the annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Astana, in Kazakhstan. This is huge. I assume there will be less than zero coverage in American mainstream media. So, okay, the basics. Shanghai Cooperation Organization has 9 members. Iran was admitted last year, and Belarus will be admitted officially this year. So it's going to be SCO 10. We have BRICS 10 already. There are 3 key members in both BRICS and SCO: Russia, China, and India. So it's not by accident that Lukashenko, months ago, and then several top Russian officials these past few weeks, and even people who are not even members of the SCO start saying, well, sooner or later, the BRICS and the SCO will merge. This is a serious possibility, I would say, in the medium to long term. Let's say before the end of this decade, for sure. BRICS, as Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, already told us a few days ago, we're not going to get new members this year. So in the summit in Kazan next October, there won't be new BRICS members. But there's this enormous list of countries who want to become part of BRICS or who already started their formal applications to join BRICS. Over 40. Many of them Central Asians and Southeast Asians, where I am now. Well, this is going to happen, let's say, within the next 2 years or so. But in the process of accommodating the new members, Russia and China are thinking long-term about, okay, which are the really strategic partners for the first round of BRICS expansion, assuming we have it, let's say, next year. And we have very important Central Asian and West Asian candidates, example, Kazakhstan and Turkey. Turkey already saying we're dying to get in. And here in Southeast Asia, there are at least 5, just to give an idea. Vietnam is on the list, Indonesia is on the list, and Thailand, where I am, and Malaysia, in these next few weeks said, of course we want to be part of BRICS as well. So everybody wants to be part of BRICS. So this gets into the most important security geopolitical development nowadays, which transcends what's going on in Ukraine, which is a new geopolitical, geoeconomic security partnership, including in this case, a convergence of BRICS 10 and SCO 10 towards...
Let me stop you for a minute, because both times that you just described BRICS, SCO, and the potential merger of them, you use security as well as geopolitical.
Yes.
Would there be some defensive agreements? Attack one, attack all, attack one, we'll support you. How does that work?
No, it won't be. It would be along the same lines of BRICS, which is something that Lavrov himself is always reiterating. They like the idea of BRICS as being a flexible club with no statutes, with no secretariat general, an open discussion club. And the SCO is more or less the same thing. Although they have a secretary general, it's a much more formal organization compared to BRICS. But in the event, in the next, let's say 2 or 3 years, 4 years, where they start converging, because they are thinking along the same lines. And the top 2 of these 2 multilateral organizations are Russia and China. The top 3 would include India, but India depends on how Russia is going to manage the India-Chinese problems. And the middleman in this case is Russia, always.
Okay.
The big thing, yes, go ahead, please.
No. Finish on SCO, please. Then I want to get back to President Putin, because we have a clip of him yesterday that I want to play for you and want you to analyze. Is the West aware of what you just described? Because there has been zero in mainstream media here about SCO meeting.
Yes. No, they have no idea, Judge. And to give you an idea, years ago, when I was living in Asia, most of these past 2 decades, in fact, Whenever I wrote a column at my previous home, Asia Times, based in Hong Kong, about SEO, everybody says, what is this? They had no clue. And especially in the US, people had no idea what the SEO even was. Now they have to, because Iran became a full member last year. So there is at least some attention in some, let's say, academic or think tank quarters in the US. But they still don't understand what the SEO means. They say, it's the Asian NATO. No, it's not the Asian NATO. It started as a security organization, and it's evolving as a geoeconomic organization. When you go to an SEO meeting, they are basically discussing trade and commerce, also security, and also, okay, what we can do against terrorism imported from other latitudes and coming here to Asia. But the key focus is geoeconomics.
Let's get back to Russia. What did the American Secretary of Defense and the Russian Defense Minister talk about on the phone last week? I know you weren't there. Their first conversation in a year, and this in spite of the fact that Tony Blinken won't talk to Sergei Lavrov.
Well, Lloyd Austin, at least he ordered his minions to make the call. This call came from the US, not the other way around. So obviously he felt the need to reassure the Russians that no, we, Pentagon, we're not thinking of doing anything funny around your borders or even inside the Russian Federation.
Do you think they talked about what happened at Sevastopol?
In fact, discussing this in Moscow, no, nobody does, because it's implied, and the Americans know that the Russians know, and the Americans told, and the Russians told the Americans in their faces, even in Moscow and via Nebenzia at the UN Security Council. No, we know everything. We know who organizes shooting of. Launching of attack MS, whatever you say doesn't change anything. The Russians are, let's say, they were very much interested in what Lloyd Austin was telling them. Of course, we don't know because this is classified information. In terms of provocations, if they could detect a hint that there will be some sort of provocation on the American side. Apparently not. This has not leaked in Russia, at least.
Here's President Putin yesterday about the decisions Moscow needs to make regarding short and intermediate range missiles. Cut number one.
We declared in 2019 that we would neither manufacture nor deploy these missiles until the United States does so. In certain parts of the world, it is understood today that the United States not only manufactures these missile systems, but has also transported them to Europe for drills, specifically to Denmark. Recently, it was announced that they have arrived in the Philippines. It remains unclear if they've removed these missiles. We need to respond to this situation and determine our next action steps. It appears that today we will be discussing the Russian Federation's next moves concerning a one-sided halt on deploying land-based intermediate range and shorter range missiles.
Can you tell us what he was talking about and what he's concerned about?
This might imply, Judge, of course, we cannot have definitive conclusions, that the Russians will reevaluate their official policy in terms of deploying medium-range missiles inside the Russian Federation, and of course, pointed to NATO. An extra information, Finland will be open to 15 US bases inside Finnish territory very, very soon.
15?
15, 1-5. That's a lot. And this is right beside Russia. This is nearly at the doorstep of Russia. If that happens, and if the Americans start operating these 15 bases, in fact, in the very near future, that changes completely the equation, not only in the Baltics, but all over. So the Russians are aware that there's going to be an escalation. In Finland, considering that Mark Rutte, the new head of NATO, he's less, let's say, epileptic compared to Stoltenberg, and less prone to bombastic declarations, but is as much a hawk as Stoltenberg is. So this is going to be really, really hardcore from now on as well. So they only expect escalation. They don't have the time frame yet. They know that it's going to start soon, probably within the next month or so. So obviously, they are.
Look at that border. That's probably 800 miles.
Even less. In the case, there are a lot of Finnish border towns where most people, in fact, they are Russophones. Or before, there was back and forth. Now that these borders are more or less closed, in fact. And a lot of people used to travel to Russia via Finland. That's not possible anymore. So the Russians only expect escalation from now on. So we come back to this window of something that is seriously discussed by, let's say, the hawkish elements in Russia, in media, academia, think tanks, on TV, etc. Look, we have a window of opportunity within the next 3 or 4 months to decapitation strike, go for the head of the snake, demilitarize Ukraine completely on the battleground, etc. All the different options.
Right.
Otherwise, after the American elections, if obviously they are planning that ahead, if we don't have a Trump presidency, then it's going to be mega escalation, and then that's it. The opportunity to finish, or not freeze, as Putin said, to conclude the war on Russia's terms, it's the next few months. Because after that, all bets are off. They cannot predict what's going to happen in the US in November.
Wow, so I was going to ask you, but you're anticipating me, how much longer you think the Ukraine war will go? Is it Putin's goal to resolve it before the American elections?
No, it's obviously he didn't put it this way. This is what people close to the Kremlin, or people who have good access to the Kremlin, are speculating at the moment, that the window of opportunity is this summer all the way to maybe end of September, beginning of October. We don't, because there are serious problems with the Russian General Staff strategy, because it is the snail strategy. It is very slow motion. This could take forever if it goes on like this. This means they will have to rearrange their strategy completely, which is something that none of us think it's feasible in the next few weeks or so. So it's a very complex scenario, but I think the most important element is something that our friend Alistair Crook talked about brilliantly, by the way. We had this conversation in Rome, Alistair and I, a few weeks ago. It's the reorganization of the Eurasian security map in terms of indivisibility of security by Eurasians, imposed on Eurasia, and this is what we decide. And you, the West and NATO, you have to adapt to it. This is what's on Putin's mind at the moment, and on Gerasimov's mind as well. The problem is they need to win a war in the battlefield.
Correct.
Completely. Yeah.
Yes. Pepe, thank you so much. Great analysis, my dear friend. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Safe travels with all your traveling, and I hope you can join us again next week.
Yes, and then let's
top UN human rights experts have stated very clearly that Israel is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, and that foreign governments supporting Israel can be complicit in these crimes. And in particular, top UN legal experts have called on foreign states to stop giving weapons to Israel. And they've gone further and stated that Western weapons corporations can be considered complicit in these crimes that Israel is committing. And they added that major Western banks on Wall Street and asset management firms like BlackRock, they named BlackRock specifically, along with US banks like JP Morgan and Bank of America. According to UN human rights experts, these Western financial institutions can also be considered complicit in the war crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza and are profiting from those war crimes. This was made very clear in a statement that was published by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, titled, "States and Companies Must End Arms Transfers to Israel Immediately or Risk Responsibility for Human Rights Violations," according to UN experts. I'm going to read a few clips from this document because it names some of the Western companies that are complicit in these war crimes and are profiting. Now, it states, "The transfer of weapons and ammunition to Israel may constitute serious violations of human rights and international humanitarian laws and risk state complicity in international crimes, possibly including the G-side crime," which I don't say because this will be censored. This is according to UN experts, and they reiterated their demand to stop arms transfers immediately. They noted that the UN Human Rights Council and independent UN experts have stated that Israel is committing war crimes. And in particular, they say that these are some of the Western companies that are supplying Israel with military equipment. BAE Systems, Boeing, Caterpillar, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Oshkosh, Rheinmetall, Rolls-Royce Power Systems, RTX, and ThyssenKrupp. These companies must end their transfers to Israel. Research shows that the vast majority of weapon shipments to Israel come from the US, 66%, but Germany also provides 30% of the weapons that go to Israel, and Italy provides another 5% of the weapons that go to Israel. So the US, Germany, and Italy have been arming Israel. While naming these Western companies as complicit in arming Israel, the UN human rights experts emphasized that the International Court of Justice at The Hague ordered Israel to immediately halt its military offensive in Rafah in Gaza, where roughly 1 million civilians were trapped. Israel completely ignored that ruling by The Hague, violating it. And The Hague also stated that the G-side crime can be a plausible risk. Furthermore, the UN human rights experts stressed that the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has sought arrest warrants against Israeli leaders over war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICC applied for arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Now, further in this statement, these UN human rights experts name several Western financial institutions that have invested in these arms companies that are supporting Israel, giving weapons to Israel. And these UN human rights experts emphasized that the following Western financial companies can be considered complicit, including Bank of America, BlackRock, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, State Street, Vanguard, Wells Fargo, and there are many other firms, including some European firms that are not as well known in the US. And these UN human rights experts emphasize that, quote, failure to prevent or mitigate their business relationships with these arms manufacturers transferring arms to Israel could move from being directly linked to human rights abuses to contributing to them, with repercussions for complicity in potential atrocity crimes. BlackRock is an investment company based in New York City, and it's the world's largest asset manager. It manages $10.5 trillion in assets, which is larger than the GDP of almost every country on earth. And what does that mean? It means that rich people in the US and around the world, that they hold their wealth in assets and things like stocks and bonds and real estate. And many of those investments are managed full time. And in return, BlackRock takes a small percentage of the capital gains made by these oligarchs. So essentially, BlackRock is an institution that exists to make the rich richer and richer and richer. And it has really done that, not only in the US, but serving oligarchs all around the world. BlackRock has heavily invested in Israel, and it actually has an entire website which is about BlackRock in Israel. And not only has BlackRock invested in Israeli assets, thereby helping to sustain Israel's illegal occupation of Palestinian territory and profiting from its war crimes, but moreover, BlackRock has also invested very heavily in Western weapons corporations like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Boeing, which are arming Israel and are profiting from Israel's war crimes. Peace activists in New York have held protests outside BlackRock's headquarters in New York City, condemning the asset manager for profiting from Israel's war crimes and making those war crimes possible, helping to facilitate them. But of course, it's not just BlackRock. There are many other Western financial institutions that have invested heavily in Israel and are profiting from these war crimes. And these include some of the top banks on Wall Street, like Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and some other major Western banks like the German bank Deutsche Bank or the French bank BNP Paribas. These were the banks that helped to underwrite Israeli bonds. What does this mean? Well, when a government or a company wants to issue bonds, that is debt, investors want to buy those, usually they need an underwriter, which means that a financial institution will essentially insure the bonds, make sure that there's collateral to back the bonds. And in many cases, what they do is they simply buy the bonds from the issuer, in this case, the Israeli colonial regime, and then those financial institutions will sell the bonds on behalf of the government or the company, in this case, Israel. So these Wall Street banks are helping Israel find Western investors who want to profit from Israel's activities. Because if you buy a government bond, you're helping to finance that government's activities. It's a government IOU. And these bonds that Israel issued offer 5% interest. So what's happening is these Wall Street banks and other European banks, they are guaranteed what's known as a spread, a profit from selling these bonds on behalf of Israel. So quite literally, they are profiting from Israel's crimes. They are making it possible for Israel to continue funding its operations as it carries out crimes against humanity in Gaza. Again, these are the Western banks that are underwriting Israeli bonds. Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, BNP Paribas, and Deutsche Bank. Now, it's obvious that the U.S. federal government is strongly supporting Israel, giving it billions of dollars in weapons and military assistance, but it's also U.S. state governments that are investing in Israel and helping to fund its war crimes. And in fact, U.S. state governments have invested in hundreds of millions of dollars of Israeli bonds. And this was just in the first month of the Israeli war on Gaza. As of November 2023, this was reported at 300 million of U.S. state government investments in Israeli bonds. The number has likely increased very significantly since then. But in just 1 month, as Israel was brutally bombing Gaza, the following states invested in Israeli bonds: Florida, Indiana, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. And by far the biggest was Florida, which in 1 month invested over $140 million in Israeli bonds, that is Israeli government debt, helping to fund Israel's war crimes. And it's, of course, noteworthy that most of these states are governed by Republicans, but it's not just Republicans. It's also Democrat-run states like New York and Illinois that are investing in Israel's war crimes. So this is very much bipartisan. And The Guardian, the British newspaper that reported this, pointed out the irony that U.S. conservative politicians from the Republican Party love to complain about the so-called politicization of U.S. government spending. But the majority of this money comes from these very same conservative politicians who have no problem investing in the most political thing of all, the Israeli regime, as it's carrying out crimes against humanity in Gaza. Now, before I conclude here, I want to briefly address a manufactured scandal that the media was obsessed with this June, which was that U.S. President Joe Biden supposedly canceled a video meeting with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. And the liberal journalists in the Western media tried to use this as an example of how Biden is supposedly standing up to Netanyahu. And in particular, this story came from an Israeli journalist, Barak Ravid, who is very closely linked to the Israeli government and also to the U.S. government. And many of his scoops come directly from very friendly government sources. This June, the Western media tried to craft this narrative claiming that supposedly Netanyahu was angry because Biden is not sending him enough weapons. And Netanyahu claimed that supposedly the U.S. is withholding large bombs from Israel. But this, of course, is not true. Immediately after this, the Biden administration responded saying very clearly, we are giving Israel all of these weapons. We have no idea what Netanyahu's talking about. And this just shows this is a manufactured media scandal. Western journalists, especially liberals who are sympathetic to Biden and can see how bad it looks that the Democrats are supporting this far-right fascistic regime in Israel that is carrying out crimes against humanity, and someone like Netanyahu, who's a close personal friend of Donald Trump. Some of the Democrats are trying to claim, look, Biden is supposedly standing up to Netanyahu, but it's simply not true. This is what some liberal journalists want people to think, but it is completely false. Just hours after Netanyahu made those comments and Biden supposedly canceled a video call, just hours later, top Israeli officials held meetings with Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, and with the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. So while the media is trying to make this false narrative that Biden is finally standing up to Netanyahu, in reality, top U.S. officials continue having close relations with the Israeli regime, supporting the Israeli regime as it carries out these crimes. And billions of dollars of U.S. weapons continue flowing to Israel. As the Washington Post put it, U.S. floods arms into Israel, despite these well-documented war crimes. And although Biden claimed for months that if Israel attacks Rafah, that he would stop supporting Israel, that was a red line, he lied. It was complete PR. It was a marketing stunt, because what we actually see is that even after Israel invaded Rafah, where 1 million Palestinian civilians were trapped, the Biden administration has continued sending over $1 billion worth of weapons and ammunition to Israel. So the U.S. government has continued. There is no change in the Biden administration's policy. And of course, Donald Trump 100% supports Israel as well. The Republicans and Democrats 100% support Israel. U.S. support for Israel's colonial crimes are bipartisan. And as I discussed today, it's not just political support. It's also support from big capitalists, financial interests on Wall Street. These capitalist oligarchs are making a killing off of Israel's killing in Gaza. On that note, I'm going to conclude. I am Ben Norton, the editor-in-chief of Geopolitical
Lebanese resistance troops have been stationed at Lebanon's border with Israel, marking a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between the two regions. This buildup comes in the wake of increasing tensions over the prolonged crisis in Gaza. The Lebanese resistance group, known for its staunch support of the Palestinian cause, recently released drone footage depicting critical areas within Israel. The footage included images of crucial ports in Haifa Bay, military industrial zones, defense areas, and residential neighborhoods. Analysts interpret this move as a stark message to Israel, highlighting that its vital assets are within striking range in the event of a wider conflict. Despite the display of military capability, Israel appears undeterred. On the contrary, the footage seems to have emboldened Israeli resolve. Israeli officials have declared their intention to fully crush the Lebanese resistance, a stance that has drawn concern from the United States. The U.S. has cautioned Israel against initiating a war with Lebanon, warning of the extensive destruction that could result on both sides. The U.S. fears that Iran might exploit the Lebanese resistance to launch one of the most destructive campaigns against Israeli interests in occupied Palestine. Officials note that the Lebanese resistance of 2024 is significantly more formidable than it was in 2006, potentially inflicting severe damage on Israel in the event of war. Conversely, Lebanon could face devastating consequences, with Israel likely targeting civilian infrastructure to pressure the resistance group. In response to the escalating rhetoric and actions, the Israeli government has released numerous videos on social media platform X, showing potential targets such as airports and residential areas that could be destroyed, akin to the devastation seen in Gaza. These warnings, intended to dissuade Lebanese resistance, have so far failed to ease tensions. Amid these developments, Hezbollah troops have been strategically positioned across the border, seemingly ready for orders to invade occupied Palestine. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, have reported ongoing casualties, with the Iron Dome defense system struggling to effectively protect critical troop deployment areas. Yesterday, a drone attack in northern Israel injured at least 18 Israeli soldiers, one seriously. The drones, launched from Lebanon, triggered sirens in the Galilee Panhandle and northern Golan Heights. The IDF reported that an explosive-laden drone, launched by the Lebanese resistance, struck the Merom Golan area, injuring 18 troops. While one soldier sustained serious injuries, the remaining soldiers were listed in good condition. This attack marks a significant uptick in the use of advanced drone technology by the Lebanese resistance group, which has increasingly deployed explosive-laden drones, anti-tank guided missiles, and rocket barrages in recent months. The Lebanese resistance group claimed responsibility for the attack, stating it targeted an Israeli military site in retaliation for earlier IDF strikes. In a separate incident, a heavy rocket launched by the group hit the Beit Hillel area. The IDF confirmed that the projectile landed in an open area, causing no injuries or damage. On Sunday morning, the IDF reported strikes on sites used by the resistance in southern Lebanon. In one incident, IDF surveillance identified a member of the resistance entering a building in the town of Haula, where other operatives were gathered. A fighter jet subsequently struck the building. In a separate attack, an operative spotted in a building in Kafr Kila was also targeted and struck by Israeli forces. The intensification of these attacks and counterattacks has heightened fears of another war in the Middle East. The Lebanese resistance's increasing use of drone technology to circumvent the Iron Dome defense system is a development that will likely be studied in military history for decades to come. The proficiency of the Lebanese resistance in utilizing drones has surprised even the most skeptical observers. Many attribute their advanced capabilities to direct Iranian involvement, crediting Iran with supplying the group with the equipment and technology now threatening Israeli assets. Notably, the drone that captured footage of various parts of Israel is a new type, allegedly developed domestically by the Lebanese resistance group. Known as the Hudhud drone, its ability to film sensitive areas of Israel undetected has raised significant concerns. Although it is purported to be a domestic product, many recognize its Iranian origins, given its sophisticated capabilities. The Hudhud drone, named after a bird mentioned in the Quran, is a small, unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, designed for reconnaissance and surveillance missions. While detailed specifications are often classified, several key features are commonly reported. The drone's compact design is one of its most notable characteristics. It is relatively small and lightweight, making it difficult to detect and intercept. This compact size allows it to navigate through various terrains and environments, providing an element of surprise and versatility in operations. Equipped with high-resolution cameras and night vision capabilities, the Hudhud drone excels in gathering real-time intelligence. Its advanced surveillance equipment enables operators to monitor movements, assess battlefield conditions, and plan strategic operations with greater precision. The ability to conduct surveillance under the cover of darkness adds to its strategic value, giving operators a significant advantage in nighttime missions. The introduction of the Hudhud drone has significant implications for the Middle East conflict. Its use represents a shift towards more technologically advanced warfare tactics, potentially leveling the playing field against adversaries with superior conventional military strength. The drone's ability to gather critical intelligence without risking human lives is a notable development, enhancing the operational capabilities of those who deploy it while minimizing casualties. For Israel, the Hudhud drone poses a new challenge in terms of security and defense. The advanced surveillance capabilities of the drone mean that it can be used to gather sensitive information and conduct reconnaissance missions with a higher degree of stealth and accuracy. This development requires Israel to adapt its defensive measures to address the potential threats posed by such advanced UAV technology. Moreover, the Hudhud drone serves as a symbol of innovation and adaptability within the region's ongoing conflict. It demonstrates the ability to integrate modern technology into traditional forms of resistance and warfare, showcasing a blend of ingenuity and resourcefulness. This technological advancement not only impacts the strategic landscape, but also highlights the evolving nature of the conflict. In a related development, the recent statements issued by the Iraqi Resistance Coordination Council and Asaib al-Haq reflect a deepening of tensions in the Middle East, particularly concerning the long-standing conflict involving Israel and Lebanon. The warnings, issued in response to perceived threats from the Zionist regime against Lebanon, underscore a volatile geopolitical landscape fraught with historical grievances and contemporary strategic maneuvers. At the heart of the issue lies Israel's potential actions against Lebanon, which have elicited strong reactions from Iraqi factions aligned with the broader resistance movement. The threat of targeting American interests in Iraq and the region, articulated by the Iraqi Resistance Coordination Council, highlights the interconnectedness of regional conflicts and the fluid alliances that define Middle Eastern geopolitics. Central to the resistance's discourse is the condemnation of Israeli actions against Palestinians, framed as massacres that warrant unified Arab condemnation and decisive action against normalization with Israel. This sentiment reflects broader regional sentiments of solidarity with the Palestinian cause, a rallying point for many factions across the Arab world. The mention of the Aqaba-Basra oil pipeline in the statement raises concerns about economic and geopolitical implications, portraying it as a potential leverage point in efforts to normalize relations with Israel. This narrative underscores the multifaceted nature of regional conflicts, where economic interests intertwine with political and ideological stances. Qasadi Syed Hassan al-Khazali's assertion that American interests in Iraq would be targeted in response to Israeli aggression against Lebanon further complicates the regional dynamics. It shows Iraq's role as a battleground for proxy conflicts and the precarious position of American interests amidst escalating tensions. From an analytical standpoint, these developments highlight the fragility of the region and the potential for escalation fueled by external interventions and historical grievances. The statements by Iraqi factions not only signal defiance against perceived threats from Israel's planned invasion of Lebanon, but also elucidates the complexities of alliances and antagonisms shaping the Middle East today. Yet the Israeli military strategy, known as the Dahiya Doctrine, has sparked intense debate and profound repercussions since its inception following the 2006 war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Named after the Dahiya district in southern Beirut, a stronghold of Hezbollah, this doctrine embodies Israel's policy of employing overwhelming force in response to threats from its neighbors, often resulting in extensive collateral damage. The origins of the Dahiya Doctrine trace back to the abduction of 2 Israeli soldiers by Hezbollah fighters in 2006, which triggered a swift and devastating Israeli aerial bombardment of southern Beirut. This onslaught caught Hezbollah off guard, as its leadership had underestimated Israel's willingness to inflict widespread destruction on civilian areas perceived to harbor militant activities. Former IDF commander Gadi Eisenkot articulated the essence of the doctrine in 2008, emphasizing Israel's strategy of responding with disproportionate power to any provocation, viewing civilian areas as legitimate military targets. This approach, he argued, aimed not only to neutralize immediate threats, but also to deter future hostilities by inflicting lasting damage. Critics of the Dahiya Doctrine argue that such disproportionate responses lead to egregious violations of humanitarian law, causing extensive civilian casualties and devastation of civilian infrastructure. Gabriel Siboni, a former Israeli colonel, defended the doctrine as a necessary deterrent against militant attacks, asserting that the primary objective was to cripple the enemy's capability to launch future assaults. The aftermath of Israel's implementation of the Dahiya Doctrine has left a lasting impact on regional geopolitics. It has heightened tensions with neighboring states like Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza, where similar military strategies have been employed, leading to cycles of retaliatory violence and humanitarian crises.
Just very quickly note that we are basically involved in a war, very low-level war with the Houthis in the Red Sea, and we're not doing very well there. And you also want to remember that we fought against the Iranians on April 14th, when Iran attacked Israel on April 14th in retaliation for the Israeli attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus on April 1st. On that April 14th day, we were involved in the fight against Iran. So it's very important to understand we've been involved on 2 occasions in fighting in the Middle East. And what we worry about is getting sucked into a war with Hezbollah. We also worry about getting involved in a major war with the Iranians. The Minister of Defense in Israel, Yoav Gallant, has been in Washington over the past few days, and he's been putting pressure on the Americans to deal with the Iranian nuclear issue. And by and large, that means using American military force, maybe in conjunction with the Israeli military force to quote unquote solve that problem. So the pressure here for us to do something militarily with Iran is going to grow with the passage of time. And there's a danger we'll get sucked into this war with Hezbollah. And we're already in a fight with the Houthis. So you then ask the question, which of course is the appropriate one, is what we can do to avoid a war with Iran, to avoid a war with Hezbollah, to shut down the war with the Houthis, and to shut down the war with Hamas. My view is that there's only one way to solve this problem, and that's to get the Israelis to fundamentally alter their foreign policy, because it is the war in Gaza, the Hamas-Israel war in Gaza, that is the taproot of all these problems, except for the Iran nuclear problem. And if you want to avoid a war with Hezbollah, and you want to shut down the war with the Houthis, and you want to shut down the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, you have to figure out how to solve the problem in Gaza and the West Bank, by the way. And that involves us getting involved in putting pressure on the Israelis to change their policies towards the Palestinians, which are, of course, remarkably foolish, and adopt the smart policy. But the fact is, Danny, we cannot do that. We cannot put any meaningful pressure on the Israelis, in large part because of the power of the Israel lobby in the United States. All of this is a way of saying we're screwed.
Well, okay. All right. Well, that's a pretty simple way to put it. It's just as if to underscore your point there, in terms of changing Israelis' policies. We'll start with the taproot on Hamas. Here's Netanyahu a few days back talking about how he plans to actually cut the grass.
של המלחמה בחמאס עומד להסתיים. זה עומד להסתיים. זה לא אומר שהמלחמה עומדת להסתיים, אבל המלחמה בשלב העצים שלה עומדת להסתיים ברפיח, זה נכון. אנחנו נמשיך אחר כך בכיסוח הדשא. לא נוותר לי. אגב, אתם רואים את זה.
So he says the first intensive phase is going to be over, but then he's just going to mow the grass. And for anybody who doesn't know what he means by that, is that they mean that they'll just keep on whacking the Palestinians periodically every time they pop up, almost like a whack-a-mole. And basically that will just continue on without any hesitation or pause.
Yeah, you want to understand, this is very important, that when the fighting first broke out after October 7th between the IDF and Hamas, that Prime Minister Netanyahu said unequivocally that they were going to decisively defeat Hamas. This was the end of Hamas. That has not happened. Hamas is still in the fight. There's no evidence it's going to disappear from the fight. And it's still a potent military force. And there's no way the Israelis are going to defeat Hamas. What this tells you is that the problem in Gaza that led to what happened on October 7th has not gone away. And the Israelis are going to continue to use military force. They're going to continue to mow the grass as a way of dealing with this problem. This means that not only the Israelis, but we, the United States, have no way of getting out of this terrible situation.
Sorry about that. Gave me a little start there. Well, here's the problem. I mean, if it was only that, it would be a big problem because, basically you're saying a forever war and that we're going to have to continue giving all of our ammunition and weapon systems and whatnot to continue this going on. But as Netanyahu continued in that same interview, he's not content with just mowing that grass.
ומכים בהם בעוצמה. אבל אחרי סיום השלב העצים, תהיה לנו אפשרות להעתיק חלק מהכוח צפונה. ואנחנו נעשה את זה. קודם כל למטרות הגנה, ושנית, כדי גם, אם נוכל, נעשה את זה בדרך מדינית, אם לא, נעשה את זה בדרך.
And I'm sorry, I actually meant to read that for because I know the words are really small in there. But what he's saying there, for those who weren't able to read it, is that he's going to continue to put pressure, and then he's going to move his troops to the north and solve that diplomatically if possible, and then solve it in another way if not possible. Ergo, he's getting ready to go into Lebanon.
I mean, this is really crazy. They have not won the war against Hamas. The Israeli military is exhausted. They're having significant problems with regard to calling up reservists for a second and third time. There are all sorts of articles in places like the Jerusalem Post that talk about problems the commanders are having getting reservists to appear for their second and third tour in Gaza. This is an army that has been stretched thin in Gaza and is in a lot of ways at the end of its rope. And again, they haven't won in Gaza. So now you're telling me that they're going to take this army and they're going to invade southern Lebanon and they're going to defeat Hezbollah and put an end to the problems up in the north of Israel. This is extremely unlikely. The Israelis went into Lebanon in 1982 and they went into Lebanon in 2006, and both were colossal failures. There's no plan that I see that tells me that the IDF has the capability to defeat and erase Hezbollah as a problem. Hezbollah is a much more formidable fighting force than Hamas. And again, they have not defeated Hamas and they have exhausted the IDF in the process. They're now going to go into southern Lebanon and win up there. I don't think that that's a plausible argument.
Well, but here's the problem, John. Here's the problem with this: is if it was again us trying to change Netanyahu's focus or his objectives, whatever, that would be an almost an insurmountable problem. But as we're going to see here, it's actually the U.S. that seems to be encouraging this. Check this CNN piece out.
Last week, Israeli generals approved a plan to attack Lebanon, while Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah recently warned if it comes to war, the group will fight Israel on land, sea, and air, and also inside Israel itself.
People have heard here in Lebanon for months now, sort of saber rattling coming from Israel. But I think what has people really worried was what we've heard reported on CNN, that the Biden administration has expressed its full support for Israel in the event of full-scale hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel, which is rather reminiscent of the full-bodied support the Americans voiced at the beginning of the disastrous war in Gaza.
So again, I mean, back to the concept of this whole episode here is that U.S. leadership is drawing us closer to escalation, not closer to a culmination of getting these wars done. Why in the world, given what you just said right before I showed that video, would we now want to say we're going to escalate and support and endorse moving into southern Lebanon? Because militarily, I could go spend half the show explaining why that's a disastrous, terrible idea, but you've already articulated that. But what are we doing at the national level, John?
Well, I think, Danny, that report was somewhat misleading. I think there is no question that the administration is doing all they can to discourage the IDF from going into Lebanon. We do not want Israel to attack Hezbollah. One of our great fears is that Iran will come in and we'll be in a major war with Iran. But even putting that aside, we do not want another war. The Gaza war is enough. We do not want a war involving Israel and Hezbollah that we might get dragged into. But what we have said, and I think this was foolish, but it was done for domestic politics reasons. We have said to people in the region that if Israel does get involved in a war with Hezbollah, we will back them. And of course, we will back them because we back Israel no matter what it does. That's the way this relationship works. Israel is the tail that wags the dog. There's no question about that. So when we said that, right, we were telling the truth. But the problem is we're in effect alerting the Israelis that even if they start a war and it doesn't look like a smart thing to do, we'll support them full scale no matter what, which of course we will. And Biden has to do that. And whoever was sitting in the White House would have to do that because the Israel lobby would leave that president, in this case, President Biden, no choice. But the end result is the Israelis are free to do reckless things like invade Lebanon. And given Netanyahu's track record at doing foolish things, this is very worrisome.
And I guess really to underscore your point about the tail wagging the dog, Was it a week or two ago? Netanyahu very publicly came out and blasted the administration, Blinken in particular, about how dare we withhold 2,000-pound bombs, and claimed that there was other things we were holding back, like it's almost like a Amazon warehouse that they ordered. And what do you mean? Where's my package? How come it hasn't gotten here? As though you don't have any kind of interest or of your own. And instead of really putting them in their place, here was Blinken responding to it. And this sounds more like an apology than it does a retribution.
I'm not going to talk about what we said in diplomatic conversations. I can just say again that we have a commitment to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself against a whole variety of threats. Gaza is part of it, but it far surpasses Gaza in terms of the threats they face. The president's committed to that. We continue to move these different cases through our system on regular order. We have one case that the president's talked about publicly about the 2,000-pound bombs and concerns that we have about them being used in densely populated areas. That remains. We continue to work through that, but there's been no change in our posture, which our posture is, again, to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself across these many threats. Many of the systems that are moving through our system are ones that have been on order for, in some cases, years. It takes a long time to move these things. And a number of the things that are going to Israel won't get there for years. That is the nature of the way this works. But it's regular order, with the exception of that one system that we've talked about many times in public.
So there was no, any evidence at all of him saying, "Hey, we're going to do what we're going to do," and don't, just act like we're going to do whatever you want to. I mean, he was really just trying to wring his hands. Well, it wasn't that. And that just, in my view, and tell me what you think, this just tells Netanyahu, yes, you can do whatever you want, and there is nobody in Washington that's ever going to say no to you.
2 points. One is the sense of entitlement on Netanyahu's part is really quite stunning. Just listening to him talk, it's really quite amazing that he just feels that Israel is entitled to this weaponry, period. And the United States has no choice but to give him that weaponry. No sense that, he's dealing with a superpower here, that he's beholden to the United States in any way. Just a really profound sense of entitlement. And as an American, it bothers me enormously. But with regard to your comment, I think the fact is that Netanyahu understands full well that he can do pretty much anything he wants, and he will get all the aid he wants from the United States. He understands full well that the lobby is incredibly powerful in the United States, and no American politician is going to cross Israel in a meaningful way. No American politician is going to stand up for the American national interest if that president thinks the American national interest is at odds with Israel's national interest. The American president will do what Netanyahu wants. Netanyahu fully understands that. And that's why he treats us with contempt, because he understands that when it comes to Israel, American politicians or American leaders have zero backbone. And everything we've seen since October 7th, including Tony Blinken's performance a minute ago on your show, makes it clear that Netanyahu is right. He should treat the Americans with contempt because they are deserving of that contempt.
Wow. Really, I'm almost speechless. I have nothing to say at all to that. But here's the gist of this. All right, so we first talked about the Russia-Ukraine war and American leadership causing lots of those problems, or at least exacerbating it. Now then, we just talked about the stuff going on in the Middle East. Here's where these things mesh together, which causes even more alarm to escalation. Escalation in one area is bad, one area, the other area is also bad. But when they start kind of coalescing, then our flexibility gets worse. So first of all, you have in the Russia-Ukraine situation, United States saying we're going to change policies and openly allow Ukraine to use our weapons onto Russian territory. The Russian president says, okay, we're going to do a tit for tat, and now I'm not going to withhold it from my ability the issue of giving weapons to your enemies, wherever they may be, state, non-state, who knows? We don't know what he's going to do with that, what he meant. He then went to North Korea, made a big deal, a military pact with them, mutual defense deal that has lots of issues for ammunition and weapons and whatnot. And then you have the possibility, if Israel does launch a war and gets into one with Hezbollah, then there's the very real possibility that Iran gets involved, because I think it would be very unlikely that they're going to allow Hezbollah in the event that Israel started winning, that they're going to allow them to go down without getting involved themselves. And of course, then there's going to be real threat possibilities for the United States to also get involved. Lots of people are already saying we should do that in the United States. Then here's where the next rub comes into. Would Vladimir Putin make good on his threat before to arm Iran so that they can now do more to the U.S.-Israeli side? And then you see that this stuff just all gets mixed in together. And to me, now then the risk all across the board rises.
Yeah. Very interesting set of comments, Danny. Just to sort of build on what you said, if the Israelis go into Lebanon, that war is likely to spill over into Syria, as it has in the past, because Syria and Lebanon are neighbors. And you want to remember, the Russians are in Syria in a big way. And it could be the case that the Russians get involved with the Israelis in Syria. I'm not saying that's likely, but it is a possible outcome of a war between Israel and Hezbollah. Furthermore, if Iran gets involved in a war involving Hezbollah and Israel, that would be a huge problem for the United States. We undoubtedly get sucked in at that point. And then the question is, what would the Russians do? The Russians would surely help the Iranians as well as the Syrians. So you see, the US-Russia competition is beginning to manifest itself, not simply in Eastern Europe, in a place like Ukraine, but here in the Middle East. Reminds you a lot of the Cold War, when the Americans and the Soviets, competed in the Cold War. And in fact, in 1973, I remember when American nuclear forces were put on alert during the Yom Kippur War, and people were fearing a US-Soviet conflict. So what you're seeing here is that the two scenarios that we worry about, the Ukraine scenario and the Gaza scenario, look like they're more and more interconnected. One final point on this, Danny, and that is the Iran nuclear issue. You want to remember that the Russians can give the Russians can give the Iranians all sorts of air defense missiles that could be used to protect their nuclear assets. And furthermore, the Russians can look the other way if the Iranians decide to go down the nuclear road. In the past, we have depended heavily on both the Russians and the Chinese, and of course the major European powers, to help us corral the Iranians when it comes to developing nuclear weapons. But if things get dicey enough between the Russians and the Americans, and even the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians may be willing to, in effect, protect the Iranians as they go down the nuclear road, not simply by giving them weapons to defend themselves, air defense weapons, but also by just protecting them diplomatically. So there are just lots of ways things can spin out of control moving forward.
But also, as we have been following every week for many months now, there's fighting on the Netzarim corridor. And if we look at map C here tomorrow, we can see the Netzarim corridor. Thanks again to Maxwell for throwing these maps together. It's very handy for everybody to see what we're talking about. You can see where the U.S. Army pier is in the Netzarim corridor. Last week on the show, I told you that the pier was gone. This week, the pier's back. In my notes that I made from a couple days ago, I said the pier is back, and then I crossed it out. So the pier is gone again because they dismantled it for a day to fix it. Now it's back again. By the time you watch this segment, maybe gone again. Unclear. It's all just cynical theater. Open the crossings, end the siege. The pier is ridiculous. It's not a military asset for the Americans or the Israelis. It's a piece of humanitarian theater happening during a famine and a genocide, and it's a cynical use of American resources. It bothers me. Sorry. So we're going to focus on the Netzarim corridor resistance here, because the Netzarim corridor is, as I've showed on previous shows, they have fixed military positions along. The Israeli military has fixed positions along this corridor that are just constantly under fire. Incidentally, the pier is not one of them. Palestinians are not interfering with aid coming in through the pier, despite the fact that the pier and aid trucks were used. At least aid trucks that looked like trucks that were used on the pier were used for the massacre in Nusrat. They also used in the massacre in Nusrat, they used a vehicle packed with belongings that they said were coming from Rafah for people fleeing. So just the perfidy of the Israeli military. But in any case, we're going to focus on the Netzarim corridor because this first operation here tomorrow, number 15, this is a Qassam Brigade's mortar operation. We see the Qassam fighters with eyes here on the IDF's 99th Division command post. You can see the vehicles going back and forth there. Qassam is going to set up 2 mortar teams here and fire on the command position with 60 and 120 millimeter heavy mortars. And then we're going to watch here, you can see him set up the shot, but after here, you're going to watch ambulances and medevac helicopters again show up, because the Israeli military in this case did admit casualties, 5 casualties in this operation, at least 2 killed, at least 3 severely wounded. So these mortar operations, which I don't show all that often on the show, but there's 7 videos a week like this, literally. And in the earlier war, there was even more. They're not just firing and closing their ears. These are, and we're going to see that in the coming footage. But you can see this is the medevac not being fired on. You can see that that's the medevac ambulance not being fired on. We just saw that Qassam has mortar, that they've calibrated their mortars to hit these spots. And there goes a Sikorsky heavy helicopter. They have flares, but when they're coming up off the ground like that, you could hit them with one of those SA-18 Iglas that Sarayal Quds just showed us in the previous video. You could fire that on them, and they don't. You could fire sniper rifles. You could use the Al Ghul sniper rifle, that has an effective range of 2 kilometers and has an incendiary round, armor-piercing incendiary round. If you put one of those rounds into the helicopter explodes. So it's very clear they're not firing on the medevacs. And that's the final scene there says the mortar fragments are waiting for you from Qassam. And this was along the corridor. And again, 5 casualties, 2 killed, 3 severely wounded, according to the Israelis, from that Qassam operation. We look at number 16 here is Qassam with 114 millimeter. These are Qassam's rocket artillery, built by Qassam. You can see them here setting it up, and it looks like they're just firing it off dirt, and they're not. We'll see in the coming videos how they calibrate this. But I just wanted to bring in this one quote from Gil Malko. He's the secretary of Kibbutz Be'eri, and he says part of the reasons, which is right across the border from the Netzarim corridor. Part of the reason we are not returning is the crisis of trust between the army and our residents, and we need to restore it. I would say that that trust in the state should also be restored, but that will be more difficult. So that's the secretary, the settlement leader, the mayor, essentially, of Kibbutz Be'eri, saying that they're not going back to the envelope until the army reinstills trust in their institution that was dismantled by Qassam on October 7th. And we've been watching for 8 months as its only achievements are massacring civilians. But this is the kind of rocket fire you see right here, which is part of the reason why the Israelis are not going back to the envelope, the Gaza envelope, anytime soon. And that's why the country of Israel is smaller. It's smaller than it was on October 6th because of the envelope. It's smaller because of the north, where Hezbollah has made effectively a closed military zone that's 10 or 15 kilometers deep. So I just wanted to bring you that. Actually, the Magen David, the Israeli Red Cross, they did announce on this one that this was being fired on Ashkelon, just where everybody in Gaza is from, Ascalon, now called Ashkelon. It was fired on them there, and the Magen David ambulance service said 2 people tripped and fell on their way to the shelter, which is something that, for people who have tracked this war for the last 20 years, will remember. The Israelis used to count their casualties so comprehensively that they would report trip and falls after rocket attacks. They would say, 16 trip and falls after that rocket attack on Tel Aviv. That was 10 years ago that they used to do that. We used to mock them for that. And now, 10 years later, they get hit so hard, so regularly, that they have to lie about their casualties. The opposite of acknowledging trip and falls, they lie about their casualties because there's no faith in their institutions. There's no faith in the IDF. They have a conscription army that they need people to have faith in to go and fight, and to be forced to go and fight these wars that everybody, I think, will be pretty unanimously saying that the Israelis lost this war. Just the same way about the Americans in Iraq or Afghanistan, the Canadians for that matter. So yeah, let's look at number 17 here tomorrow, because this is where we can see, this is the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades, the PFLP. Here you see what they do. Qassam doesn't show this, but you can see the angle finder there. He's setting the angle finders, calibrating it. He's got a compass. He's got a map. With like a grid map, so that he can calculate where yesterday's shots landed. They have a spotter that calculates where the rocket artillery landed, and reports back, and they calibrate and they shift based on the compass, based on the map, on the mathematics. This is the mathematics of artillery, the mathematics of mortar fire. It's more complicated than I understand how they're doing it exactly. And even the mortar units tend to debate all of the different ways of calculating the math of how to execute an accurate mortar strike. But we saw 2 videos ago that they are accurate with these strikes. And these are fragmentation weapons, which means they explode into small pieces that fly all around. So they're dangerous, they're harassing. And this is the thing that 9 months into the war, these fighting groups are able to do. This is the PFLP, the Marxists, fighting here with Sarai al-Quds, the Islamists, which is not unusual or surprising, even though it might sound that way to uninitiated audiences, that the leftists and the Islamists would fight together. But that's happened for decades. And there's leftists in Islamic Jihad as well. Often fighters will join a group, an organization, based on their military capacity or based on their relationships in the camps that they grew up in, or based on their role in the groups. So the armed groups aren't an effective way of strictly categorizing people's political beliefs, because there's many fighters from the PFLP that would join the Qassam brigades in the 2005, 2006, when Qassam is starting to build up a national army. You'd have leftists that would join the Qassam brigades. You know, in the same way that you have leftists in the West Bank join Islamic Jihad in the Second Intifada because Islamic Jihad had the resistance capability to carry out operations. So it's not just a simple way of categorizing people. And these joint operations aren't just for the cameras to show unity. This is actually what's happening. And these are being fired on the Netzarim corridor. All these videos are being fired on the Netzarim corridor. And you can see them calibrating their position, their firing positions, because they're moving their firing positions every day, whereas most mortar units are in a fixed place in normal armies. In other armies that have access to resources, your mortar units would be stacked with ammunition, and you would continually use that ammunition from a fixed position that you're firing from. But it's inverted in Gaza. In Gaza, they're firing a small number of ammunition from multiple different spots, but they're firing at the same target. So what you're seeing with the compass and the calibration and the angle finder is they're setting from multiple days of information to recalibrate the new position of the rocket. And they're putting the angle finder on the rocket so that the rocket launches on the right angle for the right trajectory to land where it's supposed to land. And that one, that operation was the Israeli military admitted that operation, this is a video from the 16th of June that was only released a week later by the PFLP. And the Israeli military admitted that, oh, it's this one, sorry. Is this 17 tomorrow? Yeah. Is this 17? Yeah, in any case, one of these two, 17 or 18, yes, there's Tamara. Thank you, Tamara. So this actually hit an Israeli howitzer, and the howitzers are the guns, the big guns that fire the 155 shells that Leila was talking about raining down on Hind. They fire these. This is what people are talking about when they talk about artillery. They're talking about a howitzer gun that's on the border in relative safety, firing into a camp full of people who have nothing to do with the battle, who are just trying to survive in a tent camp. And they're getting 155 shells rained down on them, made by the Americans, GPS guided. So they're landing exactly where they intend to land, right in the middle of a tent camp. And so this PFLP operation with Soraya, they hit one of those howitzers, and the Israeli military admitted that they lost those howitzers, that one howitzer. And those howitzers have fired hundreds of thousands of those shells since this war began. They had claimed that they had fired 100,000 155 shells, like in the first months, going back to late November, early December. The war only began as a ground war, October 27th, something around there. So you're talking about using thousands of these a day. So they were able to hit them. Is this number 18? These three videos essentially tell you the same thing, and it's interesting to see all three of those. Yeah, so you see here, he's got the compass on the mortar map, mortar math maps. You can see it there. It's magnetic, so it sticks to and they get the angle, they get the distance, they calibrate the distance, and then they attach the fuse. See, and then the fighters here with both their bandanas, the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades and Soraya al-Quds, putting their bandanas there over the weapons is a very again chivalrous thing to do for each other, and they're saying that text there, saying they're firing on the Netzarim corridor. They're constantly going to fire on the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is open season, and the longer the Israeli military stays in the Netzarim corridor, the more these operations are going to take place, and eventually, well, I won't predict the future, but the longer they're there, the more spectacular, large-scale operations that can take place if you give time, to dig your tunnels. Which we just saw actually just before I came on air. Qassam released a video of them literally digging the tunnel right now. I have a deadline for Qassam of Tuesday night for the show, though, so we're going to have to show that one next week because it just came out. But you can see there the Netzarim corridor under fire constantly there. So thanks for that, Tamara. I got a little mixed up which one was which, because there was 3 of them that were pretty similar, but they all have the same point, that those mortars are being shot with significant foresight, calibration, mathematics, geometry, a bunch of things that terrify me to try to explain to people. I hope I did an okay job for any of you mortar or artillery units out there listening. But that's the mortar and artillery operations on the Netzarim corridor. And that wraps up the resistance report for Gaza.
Kofi, follow me.